Merci beaucoup. Thanks a lot. The first thing I want to do is to say my thanks to mamuphi for this invitation. I attended the seminars of mamuphi since September 2025, and since then I attended almost any seance. And I learned a lot, and I think that mamuphi is a place of true thinking, also in comparison with a lot of other places I went in my career as a philosopher at different universities and stuff. Here is it possible to think. And the language will be in English, but we can do our discussion also in French. And yeah, also an important thing is I will talk a lot also about mathematics, but I'm not a mathematician. So I think it is a better idea to listen more closely to mathematicians if you want to learn more about set theory or something. I'm doing here like an interpretation of stuff like this. And so they have the higher authority in that things, but I think it is important that philosophers regard what they are doing. And ultimately, this is also not an historical philosophical intervention. I'm not like reading closely Badiou or reading closely Heidegger or something, but I'm trying to do philosophy in combining them, in reading Badiou with Heidegger and Heidegger with Badiou.
Excuse me, Alexander, can you slow down?
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is for me true philosophy. It's nothing above or something else, but something different. Okay. This is the summary of the presentation. I will do a small introductory remark on the relationship of Heidegger and Badiou. Afterwards, I will introduce a bit in the problem of Heidegger and the riddle of being, which emerges out of Dilthey. The third point will be a reading of Badiou with Heidegger and also the system of ZFC. And the last point will be to extract three main positions, which seem to be plausible after this history of thinking and philosophy. And yeah. Today, Heidegger has become a persona non grata in all philosophy for his national socialist convictions. So there are only a few people who are doing research on Heidegger in Germany in this moment, and it has become a bit more difficult to do Heidegger. But nonetheless, his thinking is widespread. So you have a lot of open and secret Heideggerians today. And they put there a list like Morton, Malabou, Nancy, Marion, Markal, Hamann, Dugin, and secret Heideggerians like Latour, Bennett, and New Materialism. Also, we have Deleuze is a bit a question. You have for in the text of Badiou and Deleuze, you have the remark that Badiou thinks that Deleuze is very close to Heidegger. So I put there a question mark. I'm not absolutely sure. And related but not identical is also vitalism in general, existentialism, and postmodernism. And the commonplaces of Heidegger are like a certain way of irrationalism, a kind of relativism, positions against science, mathematics, and technology. And Heideggerianism is a popular general ideology for fascists and left liberals alike. This is a very interesting thing. You have Heideggerianism of different parts of the political spectrum. And I claim it is dangerous for ecological, political, and anti-capitalist ideas, which all rely on a certain way of science.
I have a question.
Yeah?
What do you call in here left liberals exactly?
For example, Latour. Left liberals are people who are have like liberal ideas and also leftist ideas, combine them in a certain way.
Okay, no. It's not libertarians exactly. No, of course.
Yeah, good. Okay, très bien. So, I will do three key remarks on the relationship Heidegger-Badiou. Badiou talks a lot about Heidegger, but I will concentrate on three main points. The first one is in the Manifest for Philosophy, who he tries to write a kind of history of philosophy and sees in Heidegger, in his problem with technique and science, a big enemy. Also in Being and Event 1, you have this close relationship of Badiou and with Heidegger, where he opposes the thinking of proximity to the thinking of subtraction, and of course he's on the side of Plato and against Heidegger. And then there's one small remark also at the beginning of Being an Event, where he claims that for Heidegger, mathematics have only a lateral relevance and are almost not mentioned. And these are the 3 points which I will take as a start. And then I will do 3 claims.
Alors, il y a quand même tout le séminaire de Badiou sur Heidegger aussi.
Oui. I concentrated on these 3 points to have like a focus. The first claim is there is in fact a secret but fundamental relationship of Heidegger with mathematics and even set theory. They are already on the same floor without knowing it. This is very important. I will show in what sense. Being and Event 1 and ZFC is a proper answer and an alternative to Heidegger's thinking of being. And the third claim, Being and Event 3, the immanence of truth, is a solution of the ἀπορία of Heidegger. With the immanence of truth, we can do an argument with forcing against V equals L and idealism.
C'est quoi l'aphorie de Heidegger?
Wir werden sehen. We will see. And also his claim of ontological maximalism. And the last point, this is the important thing in my project, Heidegger's thinking can be used against the open and secret Heideggerians. It can also be used for a foundation of science. We discussed about this a lot, about this possibility. So, and now I'm starting here with Heidegger, and I will do a introduction in the problem and also on the problem why Heidegger has a close relationship to mathematics. Traditionally, philosophy is supposed to grasp and know highest principles, which are sufficient to build up science. We have Plato, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, Hobbes and Locke as an example for that. And they think that the highest principles come from somewhere. They think, for example, that intuition of highest principles is possible. For example, in Plato we have this conviction, or Aristotle. We have the idea that experience is the source of these highest principles in empiricists, for example. We have also the idea that self-foundation of philosophy and science is possible, for example, in the systems of the idealists. And the important thing is that for Dilthey, who is a philosopher of the 19th century, this adventure of philosophy to build up science on highest principles that have some kind of self-explanatory power comes to an absolute end. And Hegel is the last philosopher who tried this, but his system failed. It's not completely clear in what sense he failed, but this is the conviction of Dilthey.
Can you just remind us who is Dilthey? I don't think I am familiar with this philosopher.
Dilthey is like the first, maybe not the first.
What time?
19th century?
19?
The end of 19th century.
English?
It is a German philosopher,
German?
and he is possibly one of the main influences for Heidegger. I think we will see later that all good ideas from Heidegger come from Dilthey. Yeah? And to some degree, we can discuss about that. To some degree, I think that Heidegger was very good in taking his ideas. Yeah, but we will see. Yes, and he is like one of the most important figures in life philosophy. Other life philosophers are, for example, Nietzsche, yeah, Bergson, and you will also see that Dilthey has a lot in common with Bergson. Okay. I will go forward. For Dilthey, everything emerges out of the irrational life. Life philosophy and vitalism are like the expressions for that. And the pinpoint of his idea is a so-called Weltanschauungslehre, and Weltanschauung means something like point of view of the world. And there his relativist ideas come to a certain kind of conclusion. He thinks that philosophy and religion and art emerge out of an irrational life. And the question, if you want to be materialist or idealist or objective idealist like Hegel, are not settled by reasons, they are settled by irrational life. So if you are, for example, a person who is convicted from moral standards, you will go to practical idealism. If you are more convicted of theoretical questions, you will go to materialism, and if you are like searching harmony, you will go to objective idealism. The point of this is that philosophy loses its rational power. It's just an expression of your inner life. If you have a personality that is like this, you will go to be an objective idealist. If you have another personality, you will be a materialist or something. And yeah.
What do you call a personality here? I mean, isn't it more like a philosophical stance rather than a personality trait? I mean, I'm trying to understand if you're claiming something about the philosopher or about the philosophical system.
His system consists in this relativism. He says that if we want to understand philosophy, we have to think that philosophy of a certain person emerges out of a personality's traits. This is like this kind of irrationalism. If you have a personality that is like this, you will be a materialist.
The irrational side in Deleuze comes from the fact that he pinpoints personality traits as being like vectors for thinking somehow.
The source of your conviction.
Oui, donc l'individualité, ouais, c'est l'individu font comme ça. D'où le côté rationnel.
And this irrational life is in fact the same life that animals have. So if you feel like it, you will be a practical idealist. If you feel like it, you will be a materialist. So there is no reason for deciding that. There are no proper reasons for building up a philosophical system. In the end, it's all this irrational life that expresses itself in these ideas. You have still, yeah?
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I need to ask questions because this is. I'm trying to grasp the specificity in here because you can also have people that will say to you that what you're going to have as a philosophy is tied to a fundamental decision in the sense of Sartre.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of that a true decision doesn't come out of a judgment, but is itself as something that comes as an evidence after the fact, and you just realize that you hadn't decided this all along. But in here what you're saying is that for Deleuze, I mean, he pretends that you can like sit down, reflect, and say, I think I have this personality trait. So if I have this personality trait, this is the kind of philosophical orientation that I'm going to that matches my personality. Is this how it works?
I guess it's more like an explanation why a person has a certain conviction. But in the end, it's also related to a certain way of, it's a point of the view of humanities to a certain degree.
Il faut peut-être passer parce que on ne voit pas très bien pourquoi s'attarder sur l'INSEE ici, surtout pour venir à Badiou.
We will also see that it has a lot to do with a decision, with Heidegger. This is an important point. And now what's very interesting is that you have very similar ideas by Marxists in that time. Yeah? For example, Engels, in a very similar time, claimed that philosophy is not moving by its own thought, but it's just passively reacts to discoveries in science.
C'est dans quel texte de Engels?
Je pense que dans le texte sur Feuerbach. Lenin thinks in materialism and empirical criticism that philosophy is a kind of battleground that has to decide for the correct materialist side. Only in materialism we have full science. And then, which is like the part, of course, for Badiou, we have in Althusser the idea that we can conceptualize this movement to a certain philosophy by a new way. And he thinks that, first, philosophy is not a science. It's not acting out of reasons. But philosophy is the attempt to choose between idealism and materialism. And this decision is not out of proper reasons. It's like something that enables us to have science. And the third point, we nonetheless must take a decision in favor of materialism or for science, opening up a discourse in which it's not arbitrary anymore. Yeah, and so we see here in the materialist side that they have also this idea that there is not an ultimate explanation for materialism, but we have to choose it. It's somehow an irrational decision to that, but it is a necessary decision to do that. Okay. And then we have a second source of Heidegger, which is Husserl. And I will put it as briefly as possible. You have in Ideas 1 the idea that there's some kind of a distinction between different ontologies, like you have an ontology of physical stuff, of psychic stuff, and so on, and they are all material ontologies. And on the other hand, you have the possibility to formalize them and to get mathematical things. And so the formal ontologies emerge, and he's already talking of algebra and topology, and of course set theory. And what is important is that he already says that if you have plural formal beings, you already have set theory. So this is an important source of Heidegger. And now I'm switching here to Heidegger himself. And this is, like in this graphics you can see that a bit, what Heidegger is doing, and he does that already in his first lecture, directly after the First World War, is to combine these two divisions. So we have on the one side the division of Dillzeit between the irrational life and the devitalized material ontologies for the things. And on the other side, we have this division of formalization, which is from Husserl, and which divides formal ontologies and material ontologies. And now we get to a fourth point, which is pure or formal life. And this pure or formal life is like something that is before a specific kind of life that expresses itself in a material ontology. And later we will see that this is the authentic Dasein. This is like the Dasein which has no properties anymore. Pure life to a certain degree. And this is related to being. So the idea of being of Heidegger is in fact nothing else like the attempt to think formal ontology in a way of vitalism. And you see here in this graphics that the movement of interpretation of being on time is switching from, in the first part, from things to things that are ready to hand to ultimately the authentic Dasein, and from this point it's possible to think being itself. This idea that Heidegger has already in his first lecture, this idea, is from Graham Harman, so I'm not the first one who had this idea to combine that, but it's very important to know that to comprehend the point of Heidegger. And the last point here, maybe you know the late philosophy of Heidegger. There you have this strange terminology here, which is very mystical. But my point is here to see that in the end, these notions come from, on the one side, Husserl, and on the other side, Dilthey, and they can rationally be grasped, even if he tries to use them in a very mystical way. You have questions? Yeah?
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When you say dualism in here, I see that like a dualism of deity.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to understand is what are you naming extension in here? Because I mean, usually the dual of the dual is the thing itself. I mean, what are you exactly calling this extension?
I would
try to understand the diagram.
No. We can talk about this. I guess it's an extension of this ontological fourfold to a certain degree. You have not only a division between mathematical and physical things, but you have also a division between there being things in a proper sense, yeah, like stratified beings, and on the other hand, this vitalist proximity of things, yeah. And we will later see how that relates actually to that what Badiou is doing. We can explain much better what is happening here, which is somehow a riddle, with Badiou himself. But you're still skeptical.
Non, mais là, je pense
Yeah,
que le
we can
dualisme,
go on.
son dualisme, c'est pas exactement la dualité au sens mathématique du terme. C'est simplement, comme on dit matière-esprit, tu vois, à une figure du deux. Quoi.
Oui.
Le dualisme veut simplement dire ça. Ça c'est assez clair dans la philosophie.
Mais comme il parlait de Marc.
Oui, non, mais je sais bien, mais attendons peut-être de voir comment on va en dire à Badiou, parce que sinon, alors,
Okay, we are very close to Badiou already. So I will stress out the point is now to develop a bit further here the fourth point, here this formal life, which is very important. And there you can see in what sense Heidegger is an irrationalist and why is this a problem for science. You know, in Being Towards Death, which is like the first chapter of the second book of Being and Time, going towards death is being interpreted as a fundamental moment of the Dasein. And there you have an exaggeration of interpretation. What is this going towards death? It's the authentic understanding. So the authentic understanding is the understanding of this formal life. If life is formal, then you have this being towards death. It's the acceptance of first your own death. Then, the second point, you accept that your death can be at any possible moment. The third point, because it's the death, there is the impossibility of understanding. And if you accept the impossibility of understanding at any possible moment, you stand in this being towards death. And now if we look a bit closer to the source of this thought, you can find an interesting lecture, I don't know at which year it was, about the religious life, in which this thought of your own death is also related to the thought of the end of the world. And it is associated to the apocalyptic thinking of the first Christians. You have to accept that the world can end at any possible moment, and it is possible that God returns or not returns. So this experience of being towards death is nothing else than the experience that at any possible moment anything can be different and anything can be other than your thought, and it's the experience of complete contingency. And in that sense, it's without having any specific Weltanschauung, without being materialist, without being idealist, without having religion or not having religion. It's like a complete, how would you call that, formalized life to a certain degree. It's the very possibility of existence without any content. And this is what he calls thinking of being, Denken des Seins. And the interesting thing is, this is the point in which it's getting more interesting, this absolute openness of being towards death is inherently unstable. It's impossible to stay in that openness of the pure riddle. In Being and Time, a crucial aspect, the third aspect of anticity, is resoluteness, Entschlossenheit, which consists in an act of consciousness, Gewissen, to decide. It enables in authenticity to relate to a specific being. So we switch from this absolute contingency to a specific object. And this is what he calls an Augenblick, or a moment of vision in English. In the later works, this thought is in the notion of truth. So you can grasp a specific truth in this moment of contingency. And this is what he calls event. And we will see that it's exactly the same thing what Badiou is thinking. But he will change a lot of things here. But it's clear this decision for a specific being or an event for the founding of a new world has no reasons to decide. So we can be, for example, we can decide to be materialists, we can decide to be idealists, we can decide to be religious or not religious. And there we come back to your point that this formal life is a decision. We can decide for a certain worldview, and this is what he is thinking in the Entschlossenheit, or the resoluteness. But we see it's a bit a different kind of decision, because in Althusser or in Marxism, you have always the decision, we have to decide for materialism, we have to decide for science, but here it's completely open. We can decide in any direction. So, and this has very, very bad consequences for science. This relativist conviction of switching to a specific Weltanschauung affects deeply also his notion of science. In his later text on the work of art, his position towards science and philosophy is put clear. Science, Wissenschaft, isn't the attempt to decide and to reach truth, but the search for a correctness in a specific truth. Because of this, science cannot think. It is a dependent and blind activity. So if we have already a specific worldview, we have our science and so on, but science itself is just coming to certain conclusions from already existing truths. On the other hand, philosophy is the ability to choose that, to have this moment of decision. But classically we know that philosophy thinks that it has like an intuition to make a specific direction of this decision, which will get to be more and more difficult. And then the third point is, of course, this thinking of being, which thinks the absolute contingency of these decisions. So we can see that Heidegger's thinking of being is at the same time defining a kind of pluralism or relativism, because we have a lot of Weltanschauung. You can be a materialist, idealist, Christian or not Christian, whatever. At the same time, he's totalitarian, because if we choose a specific point, we are radicalizing this and taking that. And in the end, it's...
Attends, tu assimiles le fait d'avoir une conception du monde au fait d'être totalitaire?
In the moment of Heidegger, it's like this, yes. So
Il n'a pas le mot totalitaire. Enfin, il fait cette équation, Weltanschauung égale le totalitaire. Ça paraît vraisemblable.
Okay, how can I answer to that?
Bon, enfin, c'est un point de détail, mais parce que là, ça paraît très brutal quand même. De passer de l'ouverture à plusieurs et de l'idée que si on en choisit une, on est totalitaire, tu vois, il y a quand même ça se déduit pas, donc c'est un axiome en plus quand même. Maybe it's really a problematic expression here. That this is possible, but it's well, my point is here that he's somehow absolutist. If you have chosen that specific Weltanschauung, it's like your complete truth. And for example, you can be National Socialist. For Heidegger, the decision for a specific Weltanschauung was National Socialism. So you have this strange mixture of absolute relativism, like everything is possible, and then you switch over to a specific worldview, which is completely radicalized. And this is deeply irrationalist, and this is very problematic.
Excuse-moi.
Ouais.
Si pour reprendre ton terme absolutiste,
ouais.
tu vires totalitaire, c'est pour bien comprendre l'enchaînement.
Yeah, it is.
Are you, on va utiliser des mots, on va dire simples, if you are absolutist, to use your word, are you de facto totalitarian?
I am somehow totalitarian.
Excuse me?
I am somehow totalitarian. I think...
C'est chargé, quoi.
Absolutely. But I think that it has a good reason to choose a specific worldview. I'm going with Althusser. I'm going with the Marxist that we have to take a specific decision. But in that sense, it's maybe also the wrong expression here. But I think to a certain degree,
it's a good expression here because at the same time you have no reason for it. You just take one conviction, like being National Socialist. We have no reason for that, but nonetheless we will form the world with that conviction.
Qu'est-ce qui parle là? C'est toi ou c'est Heidegger?
Qu'est-ce
qui parle quand tu dis il n'y a aucune raison pour avoir une Weltanschauung? C'est Heidegger qui parle ou c'est toi?
This is Heidegger.
C'est Heidegger? Tu dis qu'il n'y a aucune raison pour...
I don't think Heidegger says that you decide for Weltanschauung. I don't even think Weltanschauung is a concept that is constantly an object of criticism for Heidegger. Weltanschauung is something that appears within modernity in a certain way of relating to the world, which is absolutely not what he puts under the term of decision in Sein und Zeit. Absolutely not.
But
decision is, even if you wanted, A, it has a situation, so it's not anywhere and anything, and B, it's a decision of existence. It's not a decision of Weltanschauung.
I'm relating to a specific point in Being in Time, and where he's relating to Karl Jaspers. It is in this chapter about resoluteness, in which he says that if you want to know what would be a decision, you have to read this book of Karl Jaspers, where you have this combination of a specific way of life and a specific Weltanschauung. And in that sense, I think that it is still appropriate to say that of course Heidegger is against any Weltanschauung. This is completely true. But at the same time, he needs to shift back to a specific worldview. We can talk about that later. I think it's of course a question of interpretation, but I think in the end that he needs to get back to a specific Weltanschauung.
Je propose, si vous voulez bien, qu'on laisse la question intéressante. Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'une décision chez Heidegger, qu'on la reporte qu'on la garde ouverte plutôt que de nous engager dans ce... Mais c'est vrai que c'est un point. Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'une décision dans la philosophie d'Heidegger? Enfin, si vous en êtes pour le laisser...
Well, but it's an interesting question, and we can discuss later more about this. Okay, and now I'm switching to Badiou, and I would ask, are there any important questions to this point? Or can we go forward? Okay. It works?
No, c'est bon.
Okay. So, okay. The ontology of Badiou in Being in Time, Being in Event 1, is built upon ZFC and a lot of Heidegger and Althusser. And as I said, it is opposed to Heidegger in a specific sense, but also completely aware of the problems that he describes. It's on the same side of Althusser, Lenin and Engels, but he tries to find better arguments for this materialist idea in ZFC. And for that there's a certain kind of translation of philosophical notions of Heidegger and others to the problems of set theory and ZFC. So, very bluntly, it's of course a bit difficult to say that in a specific sense. You have mathematical notions with a philosophical or ontological meaning, and philosophical meaning that has mathematical notions. And here at the right side you have a bit of an overview of how this can be done. For example, the true world of sets, which is normally called V in mathematics, is in fact what Heidegger is calling being or Sein. We have specific beings in form of sets or situations. And then, what is maybe the most important thing, the decisions of Heidegger are the axioms of ZFC, and of course the possible new axioms or extensions of ZFC. And these can be known by forcing and other specific methods. And I think, and this is also a thing that can be traced back to mathematics, that this approach of ZFC and mathematics to solve problems of decisions can give a lot of interesting insights into the problem of Heidegger, the problem of ontological decisions and their arbitrarity. But it's not completely easy, because the thing that Badiou is talking about, the decision against V equals L, and the forcing procedure, is also something that can strengthen the position of Heidegger. And this is
And I think there's a correlation to that in the so-called multiverse theory in mathematics. And I will give you a quick sketch about what I will try to do with Badiou. I will do a specific overview of what is an axiomatization in mathematics in general and why it is a specific problem in set theory. And then I will talk a bit of the existence axioms, the empty set and infinity. And then the importance of forcing and it's the meaning for the decisions in ontology. And then I will talk a bit of the problem of the mathematical multiverse and ontological maximalism as a kind of solution to that problem. And then maybe if I have a bit of time, we will see how much time is left, I will talk also about axioms of large carnivores which are beyond the Kuhn theorem. Okay. We all know that the basic idea of Badiou is, at last, in being in the event 1, the equation of mathematics and ontology. But it's clear that
Je signale un petit point parce que j'ai retravaillé. En vérité, lui, il dit l'inverse. Hein. Alors on peut dire c'est la même chose ici égale, mais il dit ontologie égale mathématiques. Ce qui n'est pas tout à fait la même chose que mathématiques égale ontologie. Je te signale, c'est quand même un point. Bon, enfin. Attention à ça.
Yeah, we can talk a lot about that because we will see with Heidegger that this question can be much more interesting in what sense ontology is mathematics. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Okay, Badiou talks in his work a lot about different mathematical stuff, but in binary event 1 he talks just about set theory, and then only ZFC. But it's clear mathematics is not set theory, and set theory is not ZFC. Why does focus? And I stressed out some points why set theory can be relevant, and why this idea could be a bit dangerous also. Like, it's clear that set theory is just one mathematical discipline, and that mathematicians are using it often for foundation problems is just, you take a human tool and, yeah, you could also use another one. But it's clear that the set theory was developed for foundational problems, and you can have in this world of sets a foundation for everything. You can find every mathematical structure in sets. Also, you have the point that sets are very purely structured. Like, you can think that a lot of mathematical objects are like sets with more structure, like, for example, topological spaces.
Il me permet une petite remarque, on en a déjà discuté, mais Badiou, la théorie des ensembles, c'est pas une fondation. Hein. Enfin, je veux dire, donc, ça n'a pas du tout le statut de fondation des mathématiques. Hein.
Absolutely.
Donc, c'est pas exactement. Enfin, bon.
Absolutely, this is true, but I'm just trying to explain why he chose set theory as an important thing. And,
mais pas justement parce que c'est une fondation. Lui, il critique l'idée même de fondation. Donc, il la choisit pas parce que c'est une fondation.
Well, there are a lot of reasons why he chose that, but I'm trying to just to grasp different reasons why set theory can be central in mathematics. Yeah, they are all things that could be seen also a bit otherwise, but they are like properties of set theory in comparison to other mathematical disciplines. And you can also study cardinality and infinity more easily in sets because they are so purely structured. And what is also interesting, and maybe this is the main reason why Badiou has taken set theory as his condition of philosophy, that the true world of sets is not really found. It has no standard model in comparison, for example, to arithmetics. And yes, of course, if we take that sets are more important and we have to build philosophy here, we can also ask why ZFC. But also ZFC has certain useful properties, and the question why ZFC and not another theory is answered in the discussion of these axioms. Yeah, and as we have stressed out, Heidegger is reading set theory also like from the perspective of Heidegger. So ZFC is an ensemble of decisions to some degree, like axiomatic decisions to think being in a specific way. Yes, and generally we can say, like in a historical way, that ZFC was developed as a theory of foundation and also a theory to research infinity in general and also to settle the continuum hypothesis.
Attends, question, excuse-moi. En quoi la réponse de Badiou est une solution heideggerienne?
Ouais.
Pourquoi? En quel sens tu l'entends? C'est curieux. En quoi c'est une solution heideggerienne?
That they are decisions to build up an ontology to a certain degree.
Oui, bon, enfin, ça c'est... Je peux dire elle est platonicienne, elle est philosophique à ce moment-là. Pourquoi elle est spécifiquement heideggerienne? Attends, c'est ça que je...
Well, I think the problem is you can say that it is somehow a Platonic reading, but I think that Plato has not a good idea on what a decision is. A decision, this idea of decisions, is a theory that comes from Heidegger. Yeah, the idea of truth is also something that Badiou takes from Heidegger, and I think this is a more important aspect here. But you could also say that he's trying to read ZFC in a Platonic way. This is also true, but he is somehow building a kind of Platonic Heideggerianism, and this is what he's trying to do. Okay, and I will stress out here some problems with axiomatization in general, and this is like turn back to the general problem which we started. You know. Generally, we see that not only in philosophy but also mathematics, the guiding intuitions are starting to lack in theories. They switch to be more decisions, and I will explain what I mean by that. For example, if we look at the axiomatization of geometry, you can say that to some degree Euclid's geometry is an axiomatization of geometry, but you have always a kind of intuition of Euclidic space that is guiding this axiomatization. But then in the 19th century, they discovered the possibility to build up geometries that are not Euclidic, and they are not that intuitive anymore. So you can build consistent mathematical theories about spaces that are not Euclidic and not intuitive in that way. So that the question emerges, why should we use this axiom and not others? So to some degree, the development of mathematics, the attempt to think more general, will bring you more to the space where you have to choose axioms, like to decide on which direction to take. So for a general geometry, intuition cannot be the only source of axioms. It's getting more and more symbolic. And for example, in Hilbert's and Tarski's geometry, you have to attempt to build up geometry by a completely formal axiomatic system, and they attempted to erase any relationship to intuition, because in the end they thought that it's a better idea to build up mathematics on these decisions. So, and it's clear that if you take that topologies are more abstract or less intuitive than Euclidic spaces, then sets are even more abstract. You cannot see any set. They are always in a geometric position. If I take a set of three objects, they are always in a position to each other, so they have a geometric property if we want to have a visual representation of them. So to some degree you could say that sets are not intuitive at all. So the axiomatization of set theory is a big problem. But nonetheless, and this is very important, Gödel, which is one of the most important figures here in the development of set theory, thought that it is possible to have an intuition of set theory. Like it is possible to somehow grasp what a set is, even if you cannot see it in a proper sense. And maybe if you read the treatise of Badiou, that he thinks that this is not the case. Like in mathematics, it's not about intuition, and also Gödel was wrong to think that intuition is the important thing here in building set theory. But
my point is here to say that set theory is getting to have more problems in deciding which axioms to take because we have less intuition. And yeah, you have a question? Okay. So in arithmetics we have a similar problem, but also a new kind of combination of problems. For Kant, arithmetics is built up on our intuition of time and also the possibility to count. And then you can build up on this intuition synthetic judgment a priori to build up arithmetics and then like use theorems to express more. And we have also in arithmetics the attempt to axiomatize them. And I guess the first one, which was very relevant, were the piano axioms. And then, what is also important, you have the most primitive one, which has like the less capacity to prove things, is the Robinson arithmetics from 1950. And you can have here in arithmetics, it's a bit more easily to grasp, the relationship of intuition and axiomatization can be expressed a bit like the relationship of the intended model, which is like the natural numbers, to the theory. And for that we can use model theory to explain that. And now we have in arithmetics, in arithmetic systems, two very decisive points of mathematical development, and there were the Gödel theorems. And there are two theorems, and they are both very important for arithmetics. The first one is that arithmetic systems, and arithmetic systems means they can have multiplication and addition, can formulate sentences or questions that can neither be proved nor refuted. So you have many models for arithmetic theory, and in that sense they are not categorical. These sentences can be added to build up another theory. And if you want to use philosophical terminology to that, you could say that the thing that they are describing is not completely described in theories. It's always something outside of thinking. And this is interesting. There's always something that escapes in an arithmetic theory. And the second one is that the consistency of the system is exactly a sentence of that kind. So a system cannot prove its own consistency. And what is very important is that set theories have the same problem. In that way you could say that set theories are also a kind of arithmetics. And here two problems come together. You remember maybe I told you that for Dilthey philosophical systems fail to have a self-foundation. Somehow the problem that the arithmetic system cannot prove its own consistency is a related problem, and they will come together somehow in this reading of set theory and mathematics that you find in Lacan, and of course then also in Badiou. And it's clear that these independent statements can be new axioms for another theory, and they are not intuitive at all. We can not use an intuition to guide our decisions on them. So we know that if we describe something with our arithmetic systems, there will be some things that are undecided. And so the safe haven of intuition is collapsing more and more. We have more and more things that are just decided. And then the question is even larger or even bigger, why we should take a decision and not another. Where do the axioms of set theory come from? Do we have an intuition here or something else? And I can start here with the discussion of the basic axioms. This is like an expression for myself, just to discount them from other ones that I will speak later of. The axiom of extensionality and the union axiom and the pairing axiom seem to be the kind of axioms that are still somehow intuitive. So, in a very indirect way or something, because they are talking about finite things. And the same goes also for the power set axiom and the separation and the replacement axiom. But also here we have a very interesting problem. Our intuition might give us a hint how to build axioms for a mathematical theory,
But in the end, we could also take another direction. So even the decision to use intuition or not is a decision. So we are not getting out of a kind of relativism in regard the world of sets. So, and these problems will be even larger if we go out of the less basic, if we go to the less basic axioms. So, okay. I will not go now to the existence axiom, and then we go also to the problem we talked about in one email. Until now, the so-called basic axioms allow us to think that there has to be a set if we have another set. So they have somehow like an implicational meaning. But in the world of sets, there's actually no single set if no existence axiom is put. And in the classic ZFC system, you have two existence axioms. And the first one is the axiom of empty sets, which states that there exists an empty set which has no elements. And with that axiom, we have already sufficient structure to describe a lot of things like basic finitary mathematics, arithmetics, algebra, and so on. And then in classical ZFC, we have the second axiom. This is the axiom of infinity, which states the existence of an infinite set or the set of natural numbers. And this is important for a lot of more sophisticated mathematics, like, for example, analysis, transfinite arithmetics, and, of course, the problem of continuum hypothesis. And what is very important, like ZFC is just a set of axioms. You can just drop an axiom, like, for example, here, the axiom of infinity, and then we get another system, and then we can call that ZFC minus infinity. And this is the finitist ZFC. But also here we can ask, what intuition and non-intuition is working here? Is it arbitrary? Why have we to take that? And I think that somehow the axiom of empty set could be intuitive, but the axiom of infinity is not intuitive at all. We cannot see any infinite set. And what is also interesting is that these existence axioms are connected to the problem of the consistency of an own system.
I have a little question on that.
Yeah?
Because we keep talking about intuition in here, but it's not clear for me what you are calling intuition. I mean, the whole point of having a model of a theory is to render an intuitive comprehension of the actions that you're taking or not, or at least give usually typical for geometry, you set up axioms of geometry, and then you say, okay, what models satisfy these different actions, and you usually get your intuition this way. But I'm saying that this is not exactly what you're proposing as intuition, so I'm trying to understand what is intuition.
Okay.
C'est ça, c'est un modèle intuitif qui veut dire.
I guess, for example, if you take the natural numbers, you could defend that you have a certain intuition for them. So you have an intended model, and we can ask which axioms do we need to describe what properties this model has. Yeah? And then we can build up our arithmetic theory. But with sets, it's much more difficult because I think that sets are less phenomenologically intuitive, and maybe with finite sets, they are somehow intuitive. We can have a finite ensemble of things, but no person has ever seen infinite things. And then it's more difficult to explain why should I take the axiom of infinity. But I don't know if I
Still, I don't understand exactly how is it not intuitive. I mean, I take a marker, I just put a straight line, and I know that there is an infinite, a continuous infinite number of points in that little line that I just draw in my notebook. How is that not infinite or intuitive?
Oui, c'est une thèse forte de dire qu'on n'a jamais vu une chose infinie, parce que tu peux, en un certain sens, dire que les seules choses que l'on voit, c'est des choses en vérité infinies. C'est-à-dire, si effectivement, si tu prends 0,1, la droite, tu as une l'image de l'infini possible. Enfin bon, mais là on se lance dans la discussion de la chose continue parce que sinon on va s'arrêter.
You're saying, I get the continuum is in fact a bit like this, but even if you have a continuous line, you will not have at the same time infinitely much points in your consciousness. And for this, I would say that infinity is, in this discrete sense of the existence of all natural numbers, is not intuitive in that sense.
Non, mais très souvent, quand on veut donner une idée intuitive du fait que la partie est plus petite que le tout, on prend les nombres impairs par rapport à l'ensemble des nombres. Bah ça, intuitivement, tout le monde le comprend. Donc, enfin bon, on a là effectivement un modèle sous la main avec les nombres et on explique qu'il y a autant de nombres entiers que de nombres pairs et intuitivement, les gens comprennent. Enfin bon, mais là, ne nous lançons peut-être pas, suivons ton fil parce que, mais c'est vrai que ça, bon, il y a le.
Je crois qu'il tend à réduire l'intuition à la phénoménalité, c'est ça le problème. Je pense que là-dedans, quand tu dis ça, excuse-moi, je m'adresse à toi, enfin, à monsieur. Quand tu dis ça, tu tends à réduire l'intuition à la phénoménalité, c'est ça le problème.
Oui, c'est ça.
C'est ça le problème, parce que tu comptes, quoi. Enfin,
Bon, mais là, laissons, bon, parce que sinon on s'arrête. Hein.
Yeah. Well, okay. And the point I was doing here is like there's a strong connection of the question of the existence of infinity and infinities with the consistency of a system, because for example, no system can prove its own consistency. This is clear, but ZFC with infinity, like with the axiom of infinity, can prove the consistency of ZFC without infinity, and the statement of the existence of the infinity is somehow like the statement that there's an actual or complete sequence of all these potentially infinite sets that are in the infinitary system. So the existence axiom form a kind of guiding principle for our set theories. And this is like a graphics to express that. I hope it's understandable what I mean. That you have this strengthening of mathematical systems every time you set a new existence axiom. If you have no axioms, we are here at the left side, then you have no mathematical system. If we join the axiom of the empty set, we have like this infinity set of C. If we join like the axiom of infinite set, then we can prove the consistency of the finitist set of C, and so on. So we get a scale. And this scale will come back in the later works of Badiou. It's not that easy that it is like a scale that so on. It's a bit more complicated, but the interesting thing is that you always, if you take another existence axiom, you decide something undecided in the model of this theory and have then a more specific model and a larger possibility to calculate things. Well, okay. So now I'm switching to the main point of Badiou. We switch to the less intuitive accent of classic ZFC, the discussion of the addition of the foundation and the choice axiom. They are like the defense of a non-intuitionist set theory, in which intuitionism is avoided and classical mathematics is possible. This intuitionism is not the same thing as like the thing like to start from intuition. It's like not using classical mathematics. So you have, for example, not the possibility to do indirect proofs. But now it's also relevant to ask, why shouldn't it be better to use another, even stronger axiom, the axiom of constructivity V equals L? This could be plausible because the axiom of foundation and the axiom of choice follow from V equals L. This is the so-called constructivist orientation in being an event 1. Classical ZFC set theory does not use V equals L, and it has these two axioms separated, and is therefore in between two extremes. Not using V equals L, and also not choice and foundation in its consequences, which is like somehow an intuitionist set theory. And then the other extreme would be the use of the axiom of constructivity,
and also using them as a kind of theorems. And ZFC set theory is something in between. Exactly, you have not this extreme constructivism, you have also not this intuitionism, but it's something in between. And I think that this decision against phi equals L is the most broadly discussed axiomatic decision in being element 1. And to understand this, and also how it is related to other philosophical problems, I will do a little analysis on that. And and of course, this is like the main question. A question which is not that discussed in being an element 1, at least in my opinion, is the discussion why it should be necessary to use the other axioms still, like not going in the other extreme direction of intuitionism. Yeah. Yeah.
You are going to talk about the foundation axiom later. That's what you're saying.
I will talk about the axiom of choice. In fact, the axiom of foundation is not that in the focus. I will talk about that if I have time.
Okay.
Yeah. I will focus a bit on this question of V equals L, and depending on the question how much time we have left, I will talk a bit about the axiom of choice and the choices hierarchy, which is a very interesting thing, because there I think that there are some kind of limitations of the problem of Badiou himself. But yeah, okay. Let's focus a bit on this V equals L. So V equals L is an action which states they are only constructible sets. V is like the world of sets, and L is the class of constructible sets. And this action was discussed by Gödel to prove the consistency of ZFC with the continuum hypothesis. For Badiou, this axiom has a specific philosophical significance. It is the constructivist orientation. It is associated with idealism, nominalism, skepticism. Also the reduction to language and knowledge. And then in the theory of the subject with ideal linguistics. And on the other hand, the other statements like V doesn't equal L states there could be generic sets, and it's called the generic orientation.
Attention, il y a un point très précis. Ça entraîne dans l'être l'événement deux orientations, et pas une. L'orientation générique et l'orientation transcendante.
Ouais.
C'est très important parce que ça c'est dans l'être et l'événement 1, et dans l'être et l'événement 3, les deux sont fusionnés en une seule. Mais je veux dire là, au niveau où on en est dans l'être et l'événement 1, il y a deux orientations qui refusent que V égale L, qui sont l'orientation générique qui va plutôt miser sur les ensembles génériques, et l'orientation transcendante qui va miser sur les grands cardinaux. Donc il faut garder cette ouverture-là, sinon la négation du constructivisme se fait de deux façons dans l'être et l'événement.
Oui.
Par les grands cardinaux, un cardinal suprême, et on voit pourquoi, de toute façon, un peu l'hypothèse divine, de toute façon, et l'hypothèse générique et l'hypothèse errante. Il y a cette double, tu vois, bon.
Absolument.
Et de savoir si les deux se recouvrent, comment elles sont alliées, est-ce qu'elles fusionnent, etc., c'est toute la question de l'être et l'événement 3.
Absolument.
Simplement par la loi.
Non, c'est un bon point. Sorry, it's a good point. I guess I'm putting then a bit here in this dualist position because, in the fact, it's a bit how it is done in the theory of the subject. In the theory of the subject, you have just these two ideas. They are not called constructivism and generic orientation, but they are like the most important thing. And the other thing is that I'm not completely sure. I'm not completely sure if I'm able to discern the specific mathematical significance between the differentiation of the generic orientation and the transcendental orientation. But we will talk about that later, because I think that the distinction between the constructivist and the generic orientation can be found very easily in this question, in this mathematical question here, and the other one is a bit more difficult. But no, this is the point where I come back a bit to the beginning of my presentation. The question of V equals L or not is associated here with the oldest philosophical question of idealism and materialism, the big question of Lenin and Althusser. This translation of philosophical question into a mathematical question can solve somehow this problem or give a new perspective. And we see that generally the axiom V equals L is considered by Platonist mathematicians to be restrictive, and by hardcore realists of the set universe, they even state that it is wrong. Like, the true world of sets doesn't fit into the world of constructible sets. But now there are a lot of other problems that show up with V equals L. What is the main argument here? What is the main argument? If V is not L, then forcing is possible and generic sets are possible. Forcing allows us to demonstrate that there are additions to our set theory, to show that a sentence, in the sense of Gödel's first incompleteness theorem, is independent. They are settled by generic sets whose existence cannot be demonstrated or refuted in V equals L. So, if we don't take V equals L, if we take that V is larger than L, our universe in this set universe is in the end larger. So we can do forcing, and generic sets are possible. And for this reason, we don't take V equals L, we take V is not L. And being an event, the focus is on the forcing method and the demonstration of the size of the continuum. But the point is you can add the size of the continuum as an additional axiom to ZFC to be more determinate in this question. So in the standard ZFC, the size of the continuum is not settled. We can prove that this thing is not settled in ZFC, so we can add this axiom. But there are also other interesting applications. For example, the axiom of choice can be shown to be independent by forcing. So we have another interesting fact here. The forcing opens up the possibility of more decisions. The universe with V is not equal L is not only larger but also less determinate. This conception is not Heideggerian, even if it's about having more decisions, because it enables us the intelligibility of what can be done by adding these axioms. We can prove that there are these axioms, and these axioms, and in that sense, it is this conception of the subject of Badiou, in which it is possible to know what kind of new worlds are possible. And in that sense, it's way more Platonic than Heideggerian. Yeah? But you see, it is a Platonism of decisions, a very different and very Badiouian thing, a new thing in philosophy, in fact. So, and this is here my attempt to describe that. We can, if we have ZFC with the existence of the infinite, we can add different axioms which say us how large the continuum is. And here you see that maybe you know it already from the literature, that we get another problem, that this forcing method opens up a lot of possible different decisions. So we get another kind of relativism here. The main argument, we can think more if we allow V to be larger than L and forcing, and therefore L equals L must be wrong. So it seems the problem of Heidegger's uncertainty of arbitrary Weltanschauungen is over. But with forcing we can see... we can have a decision that V is not equal L. Yeah? We can explain that it is better to have V is larger than L, yeah, because we have more sets then. And in that sense, we can have a reason why we should choose that.
Le problème de décider l'orientation ontologique, pour parler dans les termes de Badiou, est ouvert. Sinon, il n'y aurait pas ça qu'une décision. Donc, on peut dire au contraire que ça valide si on corrèle une orientation ontologique à une Weltanschauung, à une conception du monde. C'est le problème, il est au contraire, il reste ouvert chez Badiou. Il n'y a pas l'idée que s'impose de soi l'orientation générique par rapport aux autres. Tu comprends? Donc,
oui, je comprends.
C'est ouvert, c'est l'inverse. Au contraire, on pourrait dire que là, il donne du grain à moudre à Heidegger. Je comprends pas là.
Yes, I see the point that it is open. Yeah, you cannot. There's no necessity.
Oui, donc il est pas ouvert.
Yeah, there's no necessity to go to.
Actually, it gets widened thanks to the light of the mathematical thought that is here in my opinion.
There are two things here. It gets you get more possibilities of decision, and at the same time you have more sets. And you have more sets. There are more existing sets if you are not in the constructible universe. Yeah, and this is a reason why we should take that. Yeah, a reason why we have to use we shouldn't use the axiom V equals L.
Oui, mais il y en a qui disent, au contraire, c'est une raison pour ne pas l'avoir. Donc c'est pas une raison qui s'impose. Il y en a qui disent justement, c'est un monde qui est tellement grand qu'on ne peut plus décider, donc mieux vaut avoir un monde qu'on est capable de penser. C'est exactement ça, les constructivistes. C'est-à-dire, si tu acceptes ça, tu erres, tu ne sais pas trop. Donc tu vois, c'est une raison, mais pas une raison qui s'impose à tout le monde. C'est une raison face à laquelle il faut décider. Donc, enfin bon.
Et d'ailleurs, le fait que de décider que V est égal à L, et le fait d'avoir derrière ça toute pour le dire ainsi, un univers mathématique qui permet de le réfléchir, en fait, ça donne de la place pour le penser, en quelque sorte. Même si ce n'est pas ce que Badiou fait, et pour la raison pour laquelle Badiou le fait, et cette extension, en quelque sorte, de Badiou, a comme conséquence le fait que ça étend aussi le camp de ses adversaires à lui.
Oui, ses ennemis, bien sûr. Oui. C'est pour ça que, ouais, bon, je ne sais pas si c'est important mais dans ton démonstration, mais je pense que ça valide plutôt l'idée heideggerienne que la décision est arbitraire. Sinon, c'est plus une décision, c'est un calcul. Donc, voilà.
I think that Badiou is trying to find something between a pure decision and a calculus. And somehow he finds that in ontological maximalism. We will see that in Immanence of Truth. Yeah, I have also the book with me. We can talk about that very intensively if we want. But I think that the decision to go for generic orientation and to take V is not equal L is following the logic of ontological maximalism. The world is larger. Yeah, we have much more science if the world is not constructive. Yeah, and this is a very important thing. You have a very similar structure to that what Althusser has done if he said, okay, we go for materialism. Yeah, because then the world is larger. Also, like Lenin, if Lenin says, if we shouldn't be idealists because if we are idealists, then the world is small. This is a very similar structure here. Yeah, this is the point I want to do here. So, I'm lost a bit. Yeah, okay. But the other side is, with forcing you can see more possible axioms and decisions. And it is absolutely clear, putting a specific cardinality of the continuum with a new axiom is not at all an intuitive axiom. Here Goethe's position that set theory is built up of one intuition is coming to a clear end. And I guess this point explains positions against Gödel, yeah? That it is necessary to think set theory without any intuition.
Attends, petite remarque, parce que ça va dans le sens de ce que vous disiez tout à l'heure.
Yeah.
Là, tu emploies intuition au sens de Gödel. Pour Gödel, intuition veut dire formulable dans la langue. C'est encore une autre chose. Pour Gödel, les ensembles constructifs, ils sont intuitionnables qui correspondent à des propriétés formulables dans la langue. Donc là, on a une autre acception de l'intuition qui n'est plus le phénomène, mais qui est la capacité de le formuler dans la langue, de lui donner une propriété, voilà. J'indique simplement parce que tu vois le mot intuition, on voit bien qu'il circule entre un modèle intuitionnable, un phénomène, la langue, etc. Enfin,
Absolutely, no. It's an important thing. After this, we should ask ourselves, what is an intuition? Yeah, but I think it's nonetheless that Badiou has a point here to say that the size of the continuum is not intuitive, even in a more derivative sense. Yeah, and for that, you can say that intuition is not something that is generally in axioms of mathematics. And this is an important thing and a point in which I think that he is more advanced than Gödel. So, okay. Forcing opens up a new polarity of possible mathematical axiom systems that define further our set theory.
which cannot be decided in any reasonable intuitive basis. They are beyond our intuitive grasp, but inside our thinking and our ability to decide them. And small note, it is of course certainly possible that somehow with another axiom it can be decided someday. It is possible that someday it is graspable that this continuum has to be of a specific size, but this is a question of mathematical development. Okay, but now we get to the real problem. It's clear that forcing opens up an alternative set theory, a possibility of building new extensions of ZFC. But these axioms seem arbitrary. What is the true set theory? What is the true universe of sets? Yeah, and what kind of property does it have? But this problem is even more general, because the danger of axiomatic mathematics is that somehow every consistent system seems to be equally valuable. Regarding set theory, this is called the mathematical multiverse theory, and says there is no true set theory, or it is impossible to decide what is the true set theory. This is clearly what we can recognize as analogous to the relativism of Dilthey and Heidegger of the Weltanschauung. So Heidegger comes back here through the back door. The danger is we search just the axioms that we need for our purposes. For example, if I want to do something in math, I can choose like the axiom that I want, yeah, and then everyone is in its own mathematical universe, and it's getting more and more difficult to decide what is an answer to a mathematical problem, because everyone can take its own axioms.
Et pourquoi c'est un danger?
I guess this
Parce
is
que
the...
toute décision a une forme axiomatique. Donc tu peux pas à la fois, enfin tu vois, tu peux pas, si les autres peuvent prendre nos décisions, tu vas pas leur dire c'est un danger que vous preniez une décision différente de la mienne, sinon c'est plus une décision. Pourquoi c'est un danger?
I guess this has to do with the old idea that science is a set of true sentences, and there's just one idea what is truth. And if everyone can think what he wants, then we have this kind of postmodern relativism in some way. Of course, then in every universe we have a specific science and a specific math, which is somehow consistent and so on, but you can not go to another person and say this person, look, in the true world of sets, it is settled like this.
One question.
Yeah?
Maybe, I mean, I don't see the relativism in here. What I see is simply the pluralité of, c'est la pluralité de systèmes philosophiques différents avec un système de décision différent qui par le fait d'être pluriel, ça fait pas qu'ils soient tous plongés dans un multivers en fait.
Parce que c'est ce que nous avait, David Rabouin, la relativité n'est pas le relativisme.
Ouais.
Géométrie, il y a 3 géométries, bon. Et le danger, c'est quand même de prétendre, parce qu'il y a la vérité, qu'il faudrait remettre de là-dedans, de l'unicité. Donc si dès que c'est plus unique, c'est pluriel, on dit que c'est un danger, ça va pas. Et que c'est pas parce que c'est pluriel que c'est relativiste. Hein. Parce que le relativisme, ce qui importe là-dedans, c'est que la décision, elle tient dans ses conséquences. Quelles sont les conséquences? Voilà, qu'elle soit. Mais là, ça introduit une autre possibilité. On ne va pas réduire au nom du fait que si c'est plus l'un, si c'est plus unique, on est paumé. Parce qu'à ce moment-là, tout le système de Badiou tient plus la route. Enfin, et alors à ce moment-là, on cherche l'insulte. Enfin, tu vois. Enfin, voilà.
Il peut y avoir une logique paraconsistante, une logique de la contradiction. On ne va pas dire c'est dangereux.
Comme on va dire, il y a une géométrie hyperbolique, une géométrie elliptique, ils ne sont pas les mêmes, on choisit, mais on n'est pas. On ne va pas dire c'est relativiste. Parce que, bon, enfin. Tu vois, donc c'est. Danger est très.
C'est subjectif, oui.
Et très fort, enfin. On a l'impression que ton désir, c'est un désir d'une seule. Et
Yeah.
bon, enfin,
Okay,
il continue, mais d'ailleurs, parce que lui, il ne dit pas qu'il ne peut pas y avoir plusieurs mathématiques.
Il dit.
Ce dont il parle, c'est l'ontologie.
Mais
mais c'est pour ça. Enfin bon.
Okay. I think in the treatise on transitory ontology, there Badiou states there can be not many mathematics, and this is for me. I interpret that as an typical Platonist position that it's very usual in also in mathematics by mathematicians. It's not about having different geometries. It's just about the question of the true world of sets, But my point is also here that first, I guess that Badiou is somehow against the multiverse theory, and the second point is that he has, in fact, some useful tools against this multiverse theory. And
tu vois, c'est un effet du fait que tu as renversé, pardonne-moi, tu as mis mathématiques égale ontologie. Bon, ça laisse entendre que toute la mathématique c'est l'ontologie. Mais Badiou, il ne pose pas ça, il dit ontologie égale mathématique. C'est-à-dire, on trouve l'ontologie dans les mathématiques, mais ça ne veut pas dire que les mathématiques se réduisent à l'ontologie. Là, j'ai l'impression que c'est un effet du fait que tu as inversé la position de Badiou, ontologie égale mathématique. Et évidemment, si c'est dans l'autre sens, mathématiques égale ontologie, ça veut dire que toutes les mathématiques sont l'ontologie, et donc
En fait, l'opérateur égalité est un opérateur proprement philosophique et précisément pas mathématique, qui impliquerait que du coup c'est une relation symétrique.
Il faudrait le définir. Enfin bon. Voilà, j'ai l'impression que là, il y a une ambiguïté, tu vois, dans ton position entre ce qui est mathématique et ce qui est ontologique. Voilà, pour le dire.
This is possible, yeah, but I guess that his position is stronger if it is a proper identity. But okay, against it, yeah. But nonetheless, the point I was setting out here in the text on the transitory ontology is there he says that there can only be one mathematics, and this is I interpret this as a stance against the multiverse theory. Okay, I was lost here a bit. Okay, one idea against the danger of the multiverse that Badiou affirms in a remark in Transitory Ontology, but then also in Immanence of Truth, is ontological maximalism, or the principle of maximality. Which is also in the ethics in Immanence of Truth, not in the book on the ethics, but on the ethics in the Immanence of Truth. This principle or ethics can be interpreted as the idea that the set theory that has to be searched has to describe as many sets as possible. This is not an axiom in a proper sense. It is a meta-axiom. It is like a meta-principle, and Badiou says explicitly that this axiom guided already being in event 1. And this is very important. This is like a retroactive interpretation of your own work, of his own work. And with that we can explain certainly a lot of things. We can explain, for example, the existence axioms. Yeah? Even if they are not intuitive, we can state them because they enlarge our set world. Yeah? Then we can decide that V equals L is wrong, because then only the constructible universe can be left, and then we have our larger universe. And we can also possibly deduce the basic axioms of set theory, like the first ones I talked about, like existence and pairing and so on, from this ontological maximalism principle. And there's also a very important advantage of this idea. The ontological maximalism is a meta-principle that doesn't need to be with any intuition. It's completely symbolic. We just want to think as much sets as possible. And I want to stress out here, I was also working a bit with analytic philosophy. Ircam-Paris, which is like one of the most recognized Platonists in analytic philosophy, has also this meta-principle, or she stated this in one of her earlier works in, I guess, naturalism mathematics or something. It's called maximize. Like, she's saying that in set theory, you have this implicit premise, that, like, searching for the true set theory is following this maximalization principle.
Encore, tu emploies le mot intuition, fais attention, là, tu vois, c'est pas du tout sûr que il n'y ait pas d'intuition de la chose. Je veux dire, tu peux dire l'idée de Dieu est une idée intuitive d'une telle chose, tu vois. Donc, c'est pas purement symbolique, c'est pas vrai. Il y a un imaginaire qui se greffe là-dessus. Donc, si on entend au minimum par intuition quelque chose qui noue un imaginaire à une symbolisation, tu vois bien qu'au contraire, là, il y a une intuition très forte de ça sous l'idée possible de Dieu, quand même.
This is absolutely true, but the point is that even if we don't have an intuition, this principle would work.
Ah oui, non, mais
Yeah?
c'est d'accord,
This is also a thing, like you can imagine an infinite consciousness which has an intuition in this strict sense of infinity, but we don't have this, but nonetheless we can think of all these principles without having this proper insight.
Sauf que ces constructions ne sont pas destinées à être purement symboliques. Il faut quand même à un moment donné que tu aies une sémantique de cette syntaxe, si tu veux. Donc il y a bien quand même dans l'idée, évidemment chez Badiou aussi, que si tu fais ces constructions symboliques, c'est parce que tu vas essayer d'en trouver des modèles dans lesquels tu peux interpréter, sinon ça va devenir un jeu purement formel, tu vois. Et d'ailleurs, c'était l'objection qu'il a fait pendant un temps à la hiérarchie des grands cardinaux, qui était l'impression que c'était une construction purement formelle. Enfin, on construit des trucs, mais alors là. Et donc, tu vois, c'est pas purement symbolique, sinon ça n'aurait pas de sens, ça serait du pur formalisme. Les mathématiques ne sont pas du pur formalisme, parce qu'il y a quand même toujours l'idée que derrière cette théorie, tu as des modèles possibles. Sinon...
But I guess we can think of these models without having proper intuition. And this is like this impasse of the formalism. We have a contradiction of different formal systems somehow, because like they cannot state everything about their models. And there you have also like a resistance of the model itself somehow, without a relation to the intuition. But this is a complicated thing. Yeah. Well, and I think that with this maximality principle, we can in fact get out of this pure being of Heidegger. Yeah? And this is the point I wanted to do. Even if also other philosophers stated this principle, it was implicitly used by mathematicians. With Badiou, it's possible to read it as a dissolution of the relativism and irrationalism problem of Heidegger. With it, it is possible to determine the true world or the true foundation. It is the world in which most things can be described scientifically without becoming inconsistent. All infinities have to exist, and the finite world is in the infinite world as a part of it.
Qu'est-ce que tu appelles fondation? Excuse-moi, sinon on ne peut pas te suivre. Qu'est-ce que tu appelles fondation? C'est la même chose que l'intuition tout à l'heure, mais qu'est-ce que tu appelles fondation? Tu dis qu'il y a une vraie fondation. C'est quoi une fausse fondation? C'est quoi une vraie fondation?
A foundation is a place in which everything exists, so we can model everything in it.
Non, ça c'est pas une fondation, ça c'est une prise de position, ça c'est pas... En quoi ce que tu viens de dire est une fondation? Ça tu décris une position que tu appelais le méta-principe, mais en quoi ce méta-principe est-il une fondation et est-il une vraie fondation? C'est ça la question.
I don't think that...
Parce que si tu dis qu'un axiome est une fondation, à ce moment-là on n'a plus besoin... Il faut retirer le mot fondation. Si
Ou le mot
n'importe...
axiome.
Pardon?
Ou le mot axiome. Un axiome n'est pas une fondation.
Non.
Mais si c'est ça, mieux vaut garder le mot axiome, puis c'est tout. On dit une position axiomatique, mais tu vois, est-ce que tu fais équivaloir axiomatisation de quelque chose et fondation? Mais on voit bien que dans fondation, quelqu'un peut te dire, attends, il y a une fondation qui n'est pas nécessairement axiomatique. Donc il vaut mieux... Enfin, là j'interroge ta position, tu vois. Si toi tu penses que toute fondation est axiomatique, parle d'axiomatique, ça sera plus clair. Ou s'il y en a d'autres, alors quelles sont-elles pour toi, enfin, pour que tu comprennes?
I guess the point is that with the meta principle you have a kind of evaluation principle to find a true system, and you can use that as a foundation. But it's
ça veut dire quoi?
Fondation, ça veut dire quoi? This means that we can find there everything that is thinkable in mathematics. We can find there everything that is thinkable in mathematics. It is like a place where everything exists.
Wait, but
everything.
Yeah, but not everything. I mean,
not everything.
I don't see. I don't know. I mean, it's also a usual thing that one says about this. I mean, Oui, c'est une objection assez classique qu'on fait à cette formule ontologie égale mathématique que de dire oui, mais il n'y a pas que les mathématiques, c'est bien plus que ça, parce que jamais on va pouvoir trouver la complexité de la théorie du nombre qu'il y a dans un groupe comme le set de 2L, le groupe modulaire, à l'intérieur, à partir de ces axiomes ou en s'y prenant comme un théoriste des ensembles. Quoi.
Et quel rapport avec ça
Fondation.
Je crois pas que tu as l'air de tenir au fait que la science doit être fondée. C'est bien ça? J'ai l'impression que tu tiens que la science doit être fondée et qu'il y a des bonnes fondations et des mauvaises fondations. Et moi, je t'interroge, surtout venant de Badiou, pour qui la science n'a pas à être fondée, n'est pas fondée, c'est bon. Qu'est-ce que tu mets derrière ça, puisque ça a l'air de te tenir à cœur?
Okay, let's put it like this. In Immanence of Truths, you have the idea that with the principle of maximalism and also other principles, we can find the true world of sets.
Non, pas the true. Comment?
This is called there the ontological reference.
C'est pas le vrai ensemble, il n'y a pas le vrai ensemble. On va à ce moment-là avoir un ensemble, enfin, plutôt une classe des ensembles qui est maximale. On va avoir V, mais on ne dit pas qu'elle est plus vraie que elle, ça n'a pas de sens de dire ça. On va avoir simplement une classe des ensembles V qui est plus grande que la classe des ensembles constructibles. Et il n'y en a pas une qui est vraie et l'autre qui est fausse. Simplement c'est plus grande, et alors après on peut discuter, est-ce que c'est mieux que ça soit plus grand, ou est-ce que c'est un inconvénient que ça soit plus grand? Ça se retourne complètement, ça se retourne complètement. Parce qu'on peut dire, oui, d'accord, mais finalement, tous vos trucs sont basés sur des axiomes, par exemple, un cardinal mesurable et 0 dièse existent, et pourquoi moi je vais engager ma vie sur le fait que 0 dièse existe alors que je ne sais même pas ce que ça veut dire? C'est à peu près la même chose que si quelqu'un te dit, moi j'engage ma vie sur Dieu, puis tu lui demandes ce que c'est que Dieu, et puis à ce moment-là, ça part en vrille, tu vois. Donc ce que je veux dire, c'est que le fait que ça soit beaucoup plus grand, ça peut se retourner. Ça peut, donc c'est une affaire de décision, c'est pas qu'il y en a un qui est vrai et l'autre qui est faux. Tu vois
Et je comprends. I think I understand what you're saying, but nonetheless, I think that this maximality principle, it is closer. It is.
I don't think it can guarantee that there is going to. I mean, it's like saying that because c'est comme si on disait que parce qu'on aime on a une tendance à la maximalité, alors que ça en quelque sorte ça force la décision ou que ça fait qu'une décision n'en est pas une et qu'en fait c'est par ce principe-là qu'on déduit qu'il y aurait.
Parce que si tu veux, c'est à propos de Badiou, puisqu'on en parle. Moi, j'ai un problème avec justement ce principe-là, parce que tu peux opposer à ça, non pas la restriction complète de L, mais tu peux introduire un principe d'autolimitation dans la montée aux extrêmes, si tu veux, qui, à mon avis, est un principe quand même important. En général, d'ailleurs, sinon, on parle d'hubris, en fait, tu vois, on peut aller... Bon. Donc, tu peux avoir une autolimitation dans l'exploration de V, sans avoir... Enfin, c'est pour dire à chaque fois, tu vois, tu as des décisions à prendre qui ne sont pas vraies ou justes, qui dépendent de quoi? C'est même pas qu'elles dépendent de quelque chose. Soit tu te mets dans cette décision, puis tu vis dans ses conséquences. Mais tu peux avoir un principe d'autolimitation qui n'est pas un principe qui peut être un très juste principe, si tu veux. À mon avis, c'est essentiel, l'autolimitation, par exemple, de la liberté. Tu vois? Donc,
I think the problem is I have.
Sur la liberté, le maximalisme, pour le coup, c'est
oui, c'est ce qu'il faut pas, évidemment. Ni le minimalisme qui te dit, finalement, je suis réglé par le monde et j'ai pas vraiment... Ma décision est calculable, quoi, voilà.
I think the problem is I'm running a bit out of time, but I had a very interesting fifth part to that, to the choiceless axioms. Yeah? And there you have somehow a limitational principle for maximality, or you could deduce from that a problem, which would go in the direction that we cannot just go to larger and larger models, but because we need to
limit ourselves, but I think I'm running a bit out of time, so we won't be able to make the presentation about that. But I'm.
Parce que je te signale, c'est aussi dans mamuphi, puisqu'on s'inscrit dans mamuphi, c'était l'exposé de Marin, qui était il y a 3 ans, 2 ans, qui disait on pouvait avoir une extension qui autorise le générique, etc. Mais on n'est pas obligé, d'avoir des nouveaux cardinaux inaccessibles. On n'est pas forcément contraint de tout ça, mais il faut penser l'égalité, tu vois. Donc, il faut quand même prendre mesure aussi du principe de maximalité pour peut avoir ses dangers propres, quoi. Tu vois, c'est ça que je veux dire.
Absolument, absolument. Je comprends complètement.
Évidemment, il est excitant comme ça, mais.
Okay, but before we go forward to that, I would like to make a bit like a discussion of this principle, but in the end you are completely right that this principle has its problems. So the first point I wanted to stress out, it's cannot apply it so easily every time with the large cardinals. It is thinkable that at some point we will not be able to discern which is a larger universe than another. And it is itself an arbitrary axiom, so it is a principle that can be refuted also. You know, it's like not a complete end of relativism. And ultimately it's also tied to the question what we want to do. A foundational theory where everything is, do we want to describe the world of intuitive sets, or whatever intuition might be, or a determined world of sets? So in the end, I would stress out that Heidegger and relativism, or this multiverse theory, can never be properly refuted. But you can. It has a point in thinking about alternatives or possibilities to decide between the different axiom systems. And I guess that ontological maximalism is in fact something like this. So now there would be here a fifth part where I would show the limitation of ontological maximalism with the problem of the choiceless hierarchy. I don't know. I will just show you here this graphics here. This is here from an interesting article on the choiceless axioms. They are like the highest known grand cardinals that exist, and the interesting thing is that they are just consistent if the axiom of choice is wrong. Yeah? And this, in fact, would be a kind of hierarchy of larger cardinals which are beyond the Kuhnen theorem, which in immanence of truth is like the highest point of the hierarchy. And there you would have a proper problem of deciding which meta principle is more important, having more sets or having a more determined world in which the axiom of choice is working.
En français, pardon.
Okay.
Quand tu as dit qu'il y a tous ces axiomes qui sont consistants sans l'action de choix, consistants par rapport à quoi? À quel système d'autres axiomes avec lesquels ils seraient consistants? Parce que là, un par un, je n'ai pas très bien compris.
Okay.
C'est quoi? C'est des cardinaux de plus en plus grands, ceux-là?
This R is the Reinhardt cardinal. Yeah? The Reinhardt cardinal. Yeah? The Reinhardt cardinal. Reinhardt.
Après, alors, SR, c'est quoi?
C'est super Reinhardt cardinal.
TR.
Totally Reinhardt.
Oui, d'accord, donc c'est des noms plus ça. Et CBC?
CBC, c'est Club Berkeley cardinal.
Quoi?
Club Berkeley cardinal.
Et alors, et donc, et après, et BC, c'est quoi?
I guess Berkeley cardinal.
Et alors, donc, ça dit quoi ton schéma? Je comprends pas ton schéma.
This scheme is from an article on large cardinals which are larger than the limit of the Kuhnen theorem. You know, in immanence of truth, you have this scale of large cardinals, and then you have the idea that if you want to build a Reinhardt cardinal, the Reinhardt cardinal would contradict the axiom of choice. So,
Et attends, il se situe où le cardinal de Reynard par rapport au cardinal mesurable, etc. Je suis perdu là. Il est au-dessus des cardinaux mesuraux, il est en dessous, il est
sont les cardinaux plus grands qu'on sait. Sont déjà des actions de choix.
C'est un cardinal qui est plus grand que les cardinaux mesurables, c'est ça? Et si on suppose cette existence, l'action de choix, il faut?
Oui.
Bon, attends, alors là, qu'est-ce que c'est que ce truc-là? Attends, là, c'est
in fact, with those largest cardinals, you have the situation in which the axiom of choice has a similar role like the axiom V equals L. You have this limit of V equals L in the hierarchy of large cardinals, but here at the largest cardinals, it seems as if you can build larger cardinals if you go over the
C'est quel théorème là que tu parles là? Ce théorème-là, quel nom il a ce théorème dont tu parles là? Que s'il y a un cardinal de Reynard, l'action de choix est faux.
Oui, ça c'est le Kuhnen théorème.
Quoi?
Le Kuhnen théorème.
Kuhnen? Non, c'est pas le Kuhnen, alors c'en est un autre.
Ça c'est...
Enfin bon, je suis perdu.
Ce que je crois, si je comprends bien, ce qu'il est en train de dire, c'est si on laisse de côté l'action de choix, on a disons, la hiérarchie des grands cardinaux a une structure un peu différente et un peu plus étendue que celle que Badiou.
Si on fait ZF, si on travaille sur ZF et pas sur ZFC.
Exact.
Ah,
c'est pour ça que j'ai demandé la consistance par rapport à quel système. Et c'est ZF.
D'accord. Donc là, c'est une autre hiérarchie, c'est pas V.
Oui.
C'est pas la hiérarchie V des cardinaux, c'est la hiérarchie qui est basée sur ZFC. C'est une autre hiérarchie basée sur ZF simplement, c'est ça?
Exactement.
Bon, alors là, il faudrait avoir les deux hiérarchies à côté pour qu'on comprenne.
Mais du coup, la question en bas, elle est un peu bizarre parce que c'est qui dit. So the question of the ultimate set theory V remains open. Comment en fait non, il faut avoir abandonné V pour pouvoir avoir ce truc-là à côté. En fait, c'est une alternative stricte, c'est plutôt qu'une question ouverte.
Le problème, c'est que si tu bâtis tous tes grands cardinaux sur ZF sans l'axiome de choix, tu vas avoir beaucoup de problèmes pour construire des grands cardinaux.
Absolument.
Donc, là, je ne comprends pas très bien, je la découvre, si c'est ça, si tu veux, mais tu vas avoir un gros problème parce que tu vas avoir plein d'ensembles que tu ne peux pas construire, donc je ne comprends pas très bien comment ça marche. Une hiérarchie des grands cardinaux bâtie simplement sur ZF.
My point is here, there is, in the construction of large cardinals, there is a point in which they are inconsistent to being in the universe of constructible sets.
Oui, c'est d'accord, bien sûr.
And this is an example of large cardinals in which the axiom of choice has a similar role to the axiom that everything is constructible.
Il a le même rôle, attends, reprends ta phrase.
Il a le même rôle que le constructible.
Oui.
Ça veut dire qu'il a le même rôle.
Qu'il a un rôle en quelque sorte, non pas restrictif, mais il obstrue.
La montée dans les...
Exactement. Il a un rôle obstruant en quelque sorte.
Je ne sais pas, il faut expliquer pourquoi.
Oui, moi aussi.
Je comprends rien, sinon c'est pas une vérité qui tombe du ciel, là, on n'est pas dans les évangiles.
My point is that also the axiom of choice could be dismissed, by ontological maximalism, because you can say that if the axiom of choice is wrong, we can build even larger cardinals.
Yeah, that I understood. My point is, what is again, because it comes back to intuition, to foundations, and so on, what would be the philosophical reason or motivation to do so?
It would be that.
In that case, my question becomes: what is the purpose, or what would be quels seraient les enjeux d'une ontologie maximaliste d'un point de vue de la philosophie?
C'est ça, où veux-tu en venir en fait? Où veux-tu en venir avec ça? On te coupe, excuse-nous, mais
Okay, I guess, as I told, I don't have sufficient time to discuss this, but this is in fact something that could be a limiting argument against ontological maximalism, that in the end you would need to abandon the axiom of choice. But okay, let's come to the end.
Si pour contredire ça, il faut déjà avant avoir supprimé l'axiome de choix, ça va pas, parce que l'option maximaliste, évidemment, implique dès le départ l'axiome de choix. Donc tu peux pas lui dire je te retire ça et puis après je montre que ton maximalisme ne marche pas. C'est comme si tu dis tu veux construire une grande tour, oui mais je t'impose d'avoir un petit socle comme ça. Bah, évidemment ta tour elle va se casser la gueule. Tu vois, donc,
non, mais d'ailleurs, voilà. Même pour le maximalisme, si on soutient, il faudra regarder l'article, mais si on soutient que le constructible et que l'axiome du choix, disons, tient en quelque sorte un statut semblable ou analogue dans cette hiérarchisation, et que du coup tu as deux hiérarchisations possibles, soit tu abandonnes l'axiome de choix pour faire une certaine montée, ou alors tu ajoutes l'axiome de choix, tu ne peux pas faire cette montée-là, mais alors on a celle que tu nous présentes. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire que maximaliste, vu que tu ne peux pas mettre un ordre de grandeur entre les deux montées différentes?
Entre les deux hiérarchies, oui, tu ne peux pas comparer les deux hiérarchies, bien sûr.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing, and for that, I guess that my point is here to say that you cannot just follow ontological maximalism. Yeah, it's too easy if you do that like this. Yeah, you have also other principles like determinacy and the axiom of choice or something which could be interesting and important in mathematics. And for that, it's not the only axiom. So in the end, I'm somehow also saying that it is necessary to have a limitation in another sense. Okay. I will put here together my main points, and afterwards we can discuss a bit. To concentrate, if Heidegger conceives contemporary irrationalism in the way that science relies on decisions, but there are no reasons for it, in Marxism, and especially in Lenin and Althusser, there was always a tendency to acknowledge this necessity for a decision and to decide these decisions toward more science. If Heidegger is unable to see science in science something that acts with decisions, that properly thinks, but Badiou sees in axiomatic set theory something that works with decisions and properly thinks in the sense of Heidegger. In fact, it works like Heidegger conceives metaphysics or ontology. If Heidegger is not able to give reasons why to take one decision or another, the disorientation itself, Badiou finds in the development of set theory the principles for ontological maximalism and determination as basic meta-axioms to which direction of the development has to be made. This is in harmony with the Marxist solution of the problem. If Heidegger cannot decide on materialism or idealism, Badiou can decide against V equals L and towards V is larger than L with his meta-principle of maximalization. These meta-axioms don't work always. In the size of the continuum questions, a lot of questions remain undecided. But these open points of decision are sometimes intelligible by methods like forcing. Also, the meta-axioms can come to mutual contradictions like the choiceless hierarchy. With the principles of foundation in mathematics and science can be done and is being done. And I'm referring to the fact that a lot of research is being done and a lot of new axioms can be found and interconnections and stuff. It's not completely set yet in which direction we can go. And with this principle, it is possible to make a counter-argument to open and secret Heideggerianism. And this comes to the beginning, and then I can put here this threefold table, and we can start a discussion now, if you want. Okay. This is like the classical position where you have intuition, and mathematics can accomplish self-foundation is, of course, the idea of Hilbert, and in Gödel you have the idea that this is not possible anymore, but you have a guiding intuition for building up a set theory. And of course we have here the question, what is intuition? Is this a noetic intuition? Is it a phenomenological intuition? Is it an empirical intuition? And the old idea was there's a true science which can be achieved by this intuition,
which is built upon the true set theory of axioms that can be conceived directly or indirectly by intuition. And this is impossible to hold because of forcing and because you have their axioms that are not intuitive at all. And then you have this intermediate state where you have no ultimate safe foundation of science, and intuition is not sufficient to build the axioms of our theories. There are decisions, and then there are different sciences and a multiverse of sciences which have inner ideas of truth and falsehood. And if you ask me, this is an easy way out because it's a much more interesting idea to look what kind of meta principles we can use to get out of this relativity. And I think that Badiou in Immanence of Truth, in describing the meta principles, how to find the true set theory, is in fact building up a theory to decide on this different multiverses of mathematics. And this is, of course, somehow conservative. It's the attempt to get back to the old idea of classical mathematics without the relation to intuition. Well, okay.
Le principe de détermination, c'est quoi, excuse-moi? Le méta-principe de Badiou?
I guess it's not described exactly like this. He talks about the set universe has to be stiff, like not moving, yeah. But this, I describe this as being determined, and the axiom of choice is, in my opinion, an axiom making the world more determinant. Like you can find where everything is. It's not that fluid anymore.
Donc c'est lié. Moi, j'ai pas compris quel est le méta-principe de détermination. Chez Badiou, c'est lié à son acceptation de l'axiome de choix. Je comprends
no,
pas.
no.
C'est quoi là?
For Badiou, in fact, the axiom of choice is explained by ontological maximalism. Yeah.
Donc détermination, c'est quoi chez lui?
For example, the most determined world would be a world in which everything is constructible. Like V equals L is the most determined world somehow.
Oui, donc mais en quoi c'est un méta-principe chez lui? Je ne comprends pas, là, excuse-moi. Tu dis qu'il a deux méta-principes, celui de maximalisme, je comprends, et je ne comprends pas l'autre. Donc je te demande simplement de...
Yeah, this... okay, this has to do with the fifth part of the...
Non, si c'est trop compliqué, tu laisses tomber.
Okay. But in fact, like determinacy could be an explanation for the axiom of choice. Yeah, we want to have a world in which we can calculate more things, in which we have the possibility to use the axiom of choice, and this is more determined. And this is a conflict between two axioms, meta-axioms. Like on the one side, the ontological maximalism axiom would bring you to the choiceless hierarchy, and the other one, like the meta-axiom of determinacy, would bring you to like accepting the axiom of choice, and then maybe also to V equals L.
Bon.
Okay.
On a un petit peu de temps encore ou... Bah, d'ailleurs, tu as terminé pile à l'heure, bravo. On prend un petit peu de temps pour...
Est-ce que tu pourrais venir à la slide, à l'avant-dernière slide?
Ça?
Non, avant. Ouais, j'ai un peu de mal à voir où tu en vas avec ça au sens suivant. À un moment donné, on parlait d'intuition, de fondation, et j'ai l'impression que donc, à des moments dans tes slides, tu faisais un certain nombre d'interprétations de lecture de Badiou qui, en quelque sorte, à partir desquelles tu constituais des problèmes ou des questions levées qu'ensuite tu utilisais la remise en cause de ces mêmes choses comme par exemple le fait de dire que these meta-axioms don't work always, pour ensuite donner, en quelque sorte donner ce que tu appelles un contre-argument. Sauf que si tu utilisais quelque chose que tu interprètes pour poser un problème qu'ensuite tu vas refuter par l'existence même de ce que tu as posé comme prémisse, ça semble un peu circulaire en fait.
Let's put it like this. These meta principles are the attempt to discern between different possibilities in the multiverse or in the different Weltanschauungen. And of course, they can never be in the form that we can properly sort go out of this relativism. But they can help us to get out of this problem. We have reasons to decide. Yeah. And this is the important thing, and I guess that in immanence of
the problems were, I mean, the fact of calling them problems was already problematic in a way.
Okay.
But a second question, maybe a little bit less wide question, because I never finally understood what was a decision for Heidegger. Qu'est-ce qu'une décision pour Heidegger?
Oui, ça, dans les leçons, peut-être. Oui, c'est une question en soi. Mais tu peux revenir à l'autre, à ton dernier slide. C'est un problème énorme, là, je propose de... Oui, là, je propose de ne pas l'engager ici.
Non,
mais si tu veux, prenons ça, parce que moi j'essaie de... J'ai l'impression que toi, ton adversaire, c'est la colonne du milieu, la tour et compagnie, d'après ce que j'ai cru comprendre. Bon. Je crois comprendre que toi, tu te réfères à la colonne de droite en te disant avec ça, je peux la rentrer dans l'art, en gros. Voilà. Mais alors, moi je vois aussitôt un problème, si tu veux, c'est-à-dire que mobiliser le méta-principe de maximalisme, l'autre j'ai pas compris, me paraît un marteau-pilon pour écraser une mouche. C'est-à-dire que ça ne va pas marcher vis-à-vis de l'autre, parce que ton méta-principe de maximalisme, il faut quand même voir ce que ça veut dire dans la réalité, encore une fois. Dans la réalité, c'est on décide qu'existent des cardinaux de taille invraisemblable en considérant qu'avec ça, alors il faut supposer que ça monte suffisamment haut pour qu'il y ait un plongement élémentaire, c'est-à-dire pour que ça puisse revenir et que ça puisse redescendre pour décider des choses dans notre monde fini. Bon. Mais il faut quand même bien comprendre qu'avec ça, tu ne vas pas vraiment convaincre les écolos, tu comprends? Parce que tu leur dis, c'est comme si tu dis, quasiment, c'est un peu comme disent les chrétiens, puisqu'il y a Dieu, de toute façon, la nature, vous inquiétez pas. Tu vois, bon, donc, miser, c'est la question que je te pose, miser sur le principe de maximalisme, d'abord, est-ce que toi, tu l'adoptes? Mais miser sur ce principe de maximalisme pas pour convaincre, mais enfin, je sais pas quoi, pour attaquer la position du milieu, c'est une stratégie très problématique, Il me semble, moi, c'est la question que je te pose, en fait. Hein. C'est-à-dire que si on veut, je veux bien qu'on dise qu'on essaye de s'opposer à la colonne du milieu, mais si le seul moyen, c'est de faire sien ce méta-principe de maximalisme, à mon avis, on n'est pas au bout de nos peines.
Ok.
Tu comprends?
Oui, je comprends. 2 points.
Parce que ton dernier slide, le slide juste avant, excuse-moi, c'est ce que tu dis. Avec ces principes, il est possible, voilà, tu vois, avec ces principes, donc de maximalité, il est possible de faire un contre-argument à tous ces gens-là. Hein, c'est ça que... Mais je te dis attention, parce que...
Okay, let's put it maybe to the problem that already exists in Althusser. You have in Althusser the idea that materialism, is beset by positions which ultimately don't have a complete justification. Like you say, okay, if we think that the world is material, then our science works, and of course I cannot explain that it is like this. Yeah, but if we decide against this, then we have less science and it works less good. And this is like, of course, it is not a complete end of relativism, but it is still the closest point you can get to. Yeah, and I guess to some degree, using the principle of maximality is something similar. This is the one thing, and the other thing is there are also other principles like determination. Which I couldn't explain here because of the, I hadn't enough time.
which have a similar role and which can be settled to explain, for example, the axiom of choice. And they make it less arbitrary. The point is, if we live in a world in which everything can be decided, we need some principle, or we should use a principle to decide for the correct world or for the correct Weltanschauung. And I guess there is a kind of similarity in the way in which these principles are set and the way in which Althusser decides for materialism. But it's ultimately, it's not. It's always an arbitrary decision.
Moi, il y a plusieurs choses que je ne comprends pas. Bon, peut-être aussi il y a des choses. Enfin, pour moi, Heidegger n'est pas un constructiviste, donc déjà, je n'aurais pas du tout les mêmes façons de distribuer. Mais bon, j'entends peut-être cette tentative ici de dire voilà, on va essayer d'amener le pion au constructivisme. Mais même ici, quand tu prends Althusser, Lénine, et puis tu as dit, voilà, le matérialisme est toujours une affaire de décision, ben en fait, bon, quand même, la science d'Althusser, elle est prédictive sur l'absence de sujet. C'est ça qui est important pour Althusser dans la science. Or, chez Badiou, c'est exactement l'inverse. Et Badiou, en ce sens, n'est réellement pas un althussérien, même si parfois il est un peu très complaisant avec Althusser, à mon avis. Hein, mais surtout qu'on pourrait aussi avoir un combat avec le fait qu'aujourd'hui, la philosophie spontanée du marxisme, c'est l'althussérisme, c'est peut-être ça qu'il faut remettre en question. Mais en tout cas, je veux dire, le matérialisme de Badiou, c'est un matérialisme où il y a à la fois un reflet et une asymptote, ça c'est établi, enfin c'est des choses qu'on avait discutées. De dire, voilà, c'est pas l'identité de l'objet avec sa connaissance, c'est précisément l'intrusion de l'activité de la connaissance qui permet, y compris le forçage et la décision. Et donc je ne comprends pas très bien parce que c'est comme si tu faisais un tableau où tu enlèves ces problèmes et puis après on doit décider. Et c'est ça que j'ai des difficultés à comprendre.
Okay. Je voudrais dire, I would like to say that, okay, it's completely clear that Althusser is against the idea of a subject that decides there. This is completely clear. But in fact, I think that the way in which philosophy acts in Althusser, like philosophy, distinct from science and also from politics, has a similar structure to that what Badiou calls a subject. And I guess there is even a text of Badiou in which he says that it has somehow a bit of a structure of that. There's some kind of voluntarism in the idea how Althusser conceives philosophy. Yeah, he even calls it like class war in theory or something. It's a very voluntary moment in that. And somehow I guess that Badiou is doing a kind of involution of Althusser's subjectivist idea of philosophy into science itself. So that what for Althusser is a relationship between science and philosophy becomes to be in Badiou the relationship of different levels of science which are decided on different axioms. So as much as Althusser can decide, okay, we have a materialist worldview, we can decide in set theory, okay, I will have this axiom and more axioms and more axioms. And in that sense, it's a kind of interpretation of Althusser itself. And yeah, this is I guess the first point. And the second point, what I'm trying to search is a possibility in this world of decisions to have a criterion. And this criterion is well, I think you can find that in the book of Immanence of Truth, if he is talking about the criteria for this absolute referent, or this absolute ontological referent, and one of them is maximalism, and another one is, I guess, I forgot the exact moment, but it is like a certain kind of determinism. And with that you can decide between the different axioms. And with that you can go out in a certain way out of this relativism of the set universe, and of course in other things maybe too.
Classiquement, parce que tu as toujours une question récurrente, pourquoi on prend cette décision plutôt qu'une autre? Ça me paraît un peu étrange, parce que, disons, classiquement, philosophiquement, de toute façon, on cherche la raison non pas en amont de la décision, mais en aval. C'est-à-dire, du point de vue, on prend la décision, quelles sont ses conséquences. C'est ce que Sartre explique dans Les Traînés. On a toujours décidé, et on explore ce que l'on a décidé par les conséquences. Donc par l'amont, ce qui se passe de ce côté-là, et pas chercher une raison en amont, dans un espèce de principe, méta-principe, qui d'une certaine façon entraînerait les décisions, mais si ça les entraîne, c'est que c'est plus des décisions, puisque c'est un calcul. Donc il faut chercher plutôt tes décisions sur ce qu'elles entraînent. Enfin, c'est comme ça pour un axiome, en fait.
C'est pour ça que je posais la question par rapport au maître de Heidegger, parce que justement, on avait l'impression que déjà là, il y a cette tentation. Alors là, je ne sais pas si c'est toi qui le décris comme ça, ou plutôt toi qui le pense par toi-même comme ça, mais en effet, ça va pas. En effet, ça va pas de soi un peu avant que de avant. Voilà. Et ici, que de se dire, on prend en amont on regarde quelle est sa personnalité, on regarde en amont et ensuite on voit qu'est-ce qui matche le mieux sur soi. C'est plutôt, on regarde. Là, si tu veux, l'image en théorie des catégories, c'est pas une limite, une colimite que tu cherches, où tu essaies de te voir quelles sont les conséquences du matérialisme, quelles sont les conséquences de trucs, et si tu te retrouves dedans, tu t'es rendu compte qu'en fait tu l'étais déjà. En fait.
Oui, et d'autant que si tu veux, la théorie d'émergence, donc on a aussi pas mal traité dans mamuphi, c'est l'idée que ce qui émerge de quelque chose, dans le matérialisme qui émerge de la vie rationnelle, c'est précisément le fait qu'il est en autonomie relative, c'est-à-dire qu'il est doté de ses propres lois. Donc ça ne veut pas du tout dire que ces lois sont déduites de ce qu'il y a avant, c'est que justement émerge un nouveau régime de lois d'autonomie relative. Parce que voilà, donc si tu mets en avant l'émergence, puisque la philosophie, la religion, l'art émergent de la vie, etc., tu vas précisément non pas regarder en amont d'où ça vient, mais quelles en sont les conséquences. Ça va un peu dans le même sens. Enfin. Et donc, mais à ce moment-là, tu ne vas pas faire de ton méta-principe. En fait, c'est ça aussi un peu, le méta-principe de maximalité, tu as tendance à en faire un axiome chez Badiou. Et à ce moment-là, ça ne va pas, parce que si c'est un axiome, ce qui vient après, c'est des théorèmes. Mais ça ne peut pas être... c'est plus une décision, c'est un théorème. Un théorème, il est calculable. Tu ne décides pas un théorème, il est calculé. Tu ne vas pas dire... Bon. Donc il a un statut... Alors oui, c'est plutôt d'ailleurs une Weltanschauung. Là, on est plus dans des catégories comme ça que justement dans l'axiome. Enfin,
oui, en fait, on dirait que tu finis par réfléchir dans ces mêmes, en réfléchissant à ces catégories-là, quelque part, tu te plonges dedans, en fait.
I guess the problem of the meta principle is that it always can get to just an axiom, and then everything is a calculation, yeah. And the other problem is that it is just the other hand would be that it is just a decision without anything you can calculate if you want to go in that or that direction. And I think to some degree this is a problem that it cannot be resoluted. In Badiou, immanence of truth, there are axioms that are discussed, but the meta-axioms are not formalized, for example. Yeah?
Parce qu'il n'est pas formalisable. Le
exactly.
axiome, il te dit il vaut mieux accepter toute existence si elle est consistante. Mais ça, il vaut mieux accepter, c'est pas un axiome. Un axiome, c'est il existe un cardinal mesurable, point barre. Voilà, c'est autre chose. Mais là, tu vois, il n'a pas même la figure elle-même d'un axiome. C'est pour ça que tu l'appelles à juste titre un principe. Mais si tu le prends comme un principe, il ne faut pas à ce moment-là le penser comme un axiome dont...
But I guess that this problem exists not only in Badiou but also in set theory that tries to maximize the universe of sets. It's like a deep contradiction between the necessity to have a principle in a world in which everything is built up on decisions and the necessity to not formalize it, but because if you formalize it, then it gets to be a calculus.
But
Yeah?
is it a necessity? I mean, est-ce que c'est... je vois pas, quand on dit il vaut mieux avoir, c'est pas. Il y a quand même quelque chose qui relève de la contingence.
Et puis de la subjectivité
Oui.
assumée et qui ne prend pas la forme d'une décision.
Oui.
Donc pourquoi faudrait-il le formaliser?
I'm not. I have no idea why this is impossible or if this could be impossible. But I have the idea that if this could be formalized in some way, then this all would collapse and you would have just an calculus. I have the impression that for Badiou this is just taken in a specific way to solve the problem of the plurality of the set universe. I guess there's even a place in which he says that it is very problematic for set theorists to give up the idea that there's one set theory, and he's trying to solve that by these meta principles. We can discuss about them, I showed like a contradiction between them in the problem of the choiceless hierarchy, but I think they are like an attempt to get back to this conservative idea that science has these theorems.
Est-ce que tu peux revenir sur ce conservative thing à
Yeah.
la fin
Yeah.
C'est un peu déjà le statut du problème de l'objection en philosophie.
Ouais.
Quelqu'un comme Gilles Deleuze estimait que les objections finalement c'était pas très pertinent au final.
Pertinent?
Et là, parce qu'on tape dans le vide. Et là justement, là, si on voit la troisième branche, ABC, le dernier rectangle, je veux dire, tu dis return to one set theory, one mathematics, one science. Je veux dire, c'est un reproche, et à la fin, justement, conservative, ça, le conservative, c'est un reproche qu'on lui a fait à Badiou, et il n'a pas, disons qu'il a une utilisation très précise de la théorie des ensembles, et il ne fait pas d'histoire des mathématiques, parce que c'est quand même un reproche qui lui a été fait assez massivement, et de manière assez, c'est pas un bon procès. Son affaire, c'est pas l'histoire des mathématiques, parce que là, justement, dans le conservative, et dans ce que tu mets au-dessus, on a tendance à se dire bon bah voilà c'est pas son affaire et ça c'est très important parce que si on lit de manière historique la théorie des ensembles on dit ouais mais il y a des choses après etc et ça c'est un reproche qu'on lui a fait. Effectivement à la fin on va dire il est conservative mais c'est pas son problème et c'est un peu le statut de l'objection c'est pas son affaire. Donc ce que je dis ne rentre pas dans la technique mathématique évidemment mais ce que je veux dire c'est que c'est un faux procès qu'on lui fait. On lui fait d'une certaine manière. Et ça, c'est gênant, parce qu'à la fin, on arrive à, bon, bah, Badiou est conservateur, c'est pas son affaire.
I also don't think that being conservative is a problem here. It's just like...
Enfin, tu le mets en même temps, hein.
What I'm thinking is that, you know, there was a moment in which, for example, they found out that gravity is a force that is acting at distance. And a lot of theorists at that moment said, okay, this is completely nuts. Yeah, they had to be like particles that cause the gravity. But Newton was the one to say, no, this force is invisible. This force acts at distances. And the true science is like giving up the idea that everything has to be working like this. And somehow it is possible that the multiverse theory is a bit like that the true science is a multiverse of theories, yeah? And the attempt to build up one science or something is the attempt to save our old worldview of science. This is the point I wanted to stress out here.
Mais je crois, moi je suis très frappé que dans ton désir, il y a un désir de vraie science, de vraie science, qui est très curieux, et puis un désir de l'un, parce que finalement, au bout du compte, tu reviens à l'un, c'est quand même très étrange, alors tu as parfaitement le droit de l'avoir, mais c'est quand même des espèces de, pour le coup, de méta-principe, ou je sais pas quoi, j'ai l'impression qu'il guide beaucoup ton parcours, qui est quand même que, et d'ailleurs, je pense que ça a à voir aussi avec ta propre problématique sur la fondation, enfin, je sais pas quoi, enfin, il y a une espèce de... Tu veux retourner à l'un, c'est quand même très étrange parce que je pense que l'un est pour toi une garantie du vrai. Au passage, c'est Badiou, très important à comprendre. La vérité n'a pas de contraire et la vérité n'a rien à voir avec le vrai. La vérité n'a rien à voir avec le vrai parce que la vérité d'un truc c'est un ensemble générique. Donc on ne dit pas qu'un ensemble générique est vrai, etc. Bon. Donc tu as parfaitement le droit de l'avoir, mais tu vois, je suis très frappé du fait que tu es orienté par ce souci du vrai, de la vraie science, de la fondation de la science et de une science. Mais c'est présupposé que il faut que tu en mesures.
Oui, surtout là, chez Badiou, c'est un concept qu'il a lui-même exposé.
Oui, mais il a le droit d'avoir lui-même.
Oui, bien sûr, mais après lui faire.
Mais il y a plus de choses. Je veux dire, c'est aussi, je pense aussi un peu comme pensage, au sens de la manière dont tu traites, dont tu exposes des problèmes philosophiques, disons, plutôt des questions de philosophie comme des problèmes, et sur lesquels à un certain moment dans ton exposé, tu disais, et il faut sortir de ces problèmes, et cette philosophie, ou ce parti prenant ferme la question en quelque sorte, ou dit que tel problème est fini, disons, ou c'est terminé. C'est quelque chose qui est assez, disons, c'est un parti pris philosophique, c'est ce que j'essaie de dire. Ce qui est en soi, en effet, comme un méta-principe de dire, pour avancer en philosophie, on pose des problèmes, en quelque sorte, on résout des questions, où on les répond et où on les laisse. Je ne sais pas, il y a comme une manière d'avancer sur des questions qui.
Mais surtout que toi, j'ai l'impression que ton souci, c'est pas vraiment, tu n'es pas exactement mathématicien, tu n'es pas vraiment philosophe. Ce qui t'intéresse, c'est la question de l'écologie repensée, donc plutôt dans des catégories politiques, on va dire, avec, j'ai l'impression que c'est ça ton moteur subjectif, si tu veux. Donc ça fait aussi un rapport à la philosophie qui n'est pas un rapport immédiatement interne, ni à la mathématique.
Complètement raté ça, là.
Oui.
Je crois, enfin, si j'ai bien compris ton entreprise. Et donc c'est pour ça qu'il va chercher dans les mathématiques, dans la philosophie, de quoi discuter la conception écologique qui serait plutôt centrée dans la colonne du milieu. Enfin, mais
ma cible, c'est l'essai de défendre la science et la science de le climat spécialement. Et pour ça, je cherche but this is something I didn't talk here. I had once the idea to present the whole project here, but then I decided that it's maybe better that I just take one thing out of it, yeah, like the critique of Heidegger, yeah, and there I exposed like the general idea how I read like the immanence of truths to find a counter-argument against the relativism, which is, in my view, necessary to build up science and then defend also science. But of course, I try to show where the problems are, because it's not that easy to find the one true science. Yeah, you have this conflict of different principles here, and I'm not the kind of person who wants to build up an illusion of scientific clarity, because in fact, in mathematics and set theory, things are not that absolutely decided until yet. Yeah.
Mais c'est quoi pour toi une vraie science? Parce que tu l'emploies tout le temps. C'est alors une fausse. Il y a des fausses sciences, il y a des vraies sciences. C'est quoi
It's like the old idea of truth. Like Plato had the idea that there's one truth.
Non, mais il y a des sciences, il y a des choses qui ne sont pas des sciences. Mais je vois. Qu'est-ce que veut dire une vraie science? C'est un pléonasme à ce moment-là. Je comprends pas quoi tu veux. Je suppose qu'il y a des fausses sciences, c'est ça?
I think if you regard different layers of set theory with differently strong axiom systems, yeah, of course they are not wrong. Like the axiom systems that are, for example, finitist or something, they are not wrong in that sense, but they are not like the absolute point in which you can do mathematics. Like mathematics can, for example, calculate also infinite things. And if you want to be a finitist, you can do that, but you are always suppressing somehow the possibilities of science itself. That's a bit the point I want to make here. And I guess the problem is also like the problem of expression. There is no like one true set theory in that sense, but you uses this idea of the meta principles and the proximity to the absolute as
a kind of evaluation principle between the different axioms of set theory, and the meta principles for evaluation of them.
Dans une vraie science, c'est pas pour toi quand même une science intégralement calculable quand même.
Nella vera sens,
Donc si une vraie science est au sens moderne, c'est-à-dire inclut en elle-même une part indécidable, disons Gödel, forcément que la conséquence c'est qu'elle est plurielle. Elle accepte à l'intérieur d'elle-même une pluralité selon que, voilà, on va prendre telle décision et de l'autre. Alors que j'ai l'impression que pour toi, c'est toujours pareil, une vraie science, c'est quand même quelque chose qui est unifié sur la figure de l'unicité, quoi, de l'unicité. J'ai l'impression qu'il y a un imaginaire comme ça qui rôde, un méta imaginaire derrière ton investigation. Enfin, j'essaye de comprendre, tu vois,
Non, moi j'ai l'impression qu'une vraie science, enfin je ne sais pas, peut-être tu me diras, mais c'est une science falsifiable.
Ah, alors là, c'est on le faut faire. Alors là,
Voilà, c'est ça, c'est beaucoup plus ça. Parce que tout l'exemple que tu donnais tout à l'heure sur Newton, sur la loi de la gravité, c'était quand même très proche de ça.
oui, il n'est pas Popperien, lui, quand même. Bah si, alors tu es Popperien sans le savoir.
Popperien?
Popper, falsifiable.
Ah oui, non, je pense que la falsifiabilité, c'est en fait une chose importante, mais it is something that comes out of the possibility to think contingency. And if you have a maximal large mathematical system, you can think the most thing that can happen, and the most thing that can also found in nature somehow. So this is the important thing. The point is, if you have a maximal mathematical system, you have the maximal possibility of thinking different natures, and then you can find in them the possibility for building up physics, which is falsifiable.
Argument. Oui. Est-ce que tu ne serais pas quelque part faisant une enquête de l'un de la nature, pas une nature qui... Non mais, disons, évidemment pas la nature comme on y pensait au 19e siècle en Allemagne, je veux dire, une nature qui comprend une pensée des sciences, qui comprend les idées, disons, mais quand même tout ça, en quelque sorte, c'est le vide d'une conception de la nature qui finalement fait une.
Il faudrait écouter son autre exposé, enfin, tu vois,
Yes.
C'est moi qui lui ai, pardonne-moi, je suis un peu responsable, parce qu'il voulait nous exposer tout son système, il y en a 2000 pages, etc. Je lui ai dit, attends, il vaut mieux quand même que tu découpes un truc pour nous, et là, tu as découpé un peu ton armature conceptuelle, ou je sais pas quoi.
Ouais, j'essaie de recalibrer la chose par rapport au fait que je pensais que c'était vraiment la philo.
Je pense que j'ai envoyé, toi, une fois, le résumé du système même, mais en fait, il y a beaucoup de différentes batailles, et il y a beaucoup de problèmes là, et ça c'est seulement l'essai de comprendre Badiou avec Heidegger, c'est seulement une pièce. Une pièce. Ouais.
Oui, si je peux dire quelque chose. Moi je sais que cet exposé m'a aidé à peut-être conforter une position. En fait, moi j'ai le livre d'Heidegger, mais en fait j'ai jamais ouvert. Être étant, et ça a été toujours ça. Est-ce que je vais les regarder un peu plus ou non? Je veux dire que la position que j'ai prise, c'est de ne pas y aller et de jamais aller voir quelque chose qui m'intéresse. En fait, ça ne m'intéresse pas, et j'ai l'impression, l'exposé en fait, il m'a conforté dans cette position. C'est-à-dire que franchement, je crois que je vais jamais aller voir ce qu'a dit. Par contre, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est à pu dire Badiou peut-être sur Heidegger. Ça m'intéresse. Alors l'autre côté, c'est est-ce que quand on choisit cette position, est-ce qu'elle est... moi j'aime bien aussi un philosophe qui est Frédéric Worms, qui est, quand il a catégorisé, quelque part, je ne sais pas si c'est le mot catégorisé, mais par moment, le moment qu'on vit aujourd'hui. Donc une question quand même que j'avais, c'est est-ce que avoir une position comme ça, je ne sais pas si c'est une décision de laisser de côté... franchement, quelque part sans intérêt d'aller voir Heidegger. est-ce que c'est en relation avec un moment qu'on dit, Worms il appelle le moment du vivant, ou est-ce qu'il pourrait y avoir des moments philosophiques autres dans le futur dans lesquels une problématique, je ne sais pas exactement laquelle, pourrait se poser, ou est-ce qu'au contraire, de prendre une décision comme ça, à la fois il y a quelque chose d'absolu, et si c'était le cas, est-ce que ce genre de décision, on peut l'avoir par exemple dans un autre domaine qui serait la musique? On ne dit pas qu'il n'y a pas des musiciens que je n'ai pas écoutés, mais est-ce que il peut y avoir un transfert comme ça en disant à un moment finalement de laisser tomber dans un domaine proprement la musique artistique des écoutes ou des manières d'organiser la musique ou de devenir un sujet musical? Est-ce qu'au contraire c'est un exemple qui montre qu'à un moment on n'a absolument pas une nécessité? Est-ce que c'est que individuel, que subjectif, ou est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose?
I think with Heidegger, you have in this text on the source or the beginning of the artwork, I don't know how it's translated in English or something, Ursprung des Kunstwerks, you have the idea, using this idea of truths with art and the decisions with it. And there he already has left this idea that you have this strong emphasis on decisions and subjects that act and take a decision. Yeah, it's more about like somehow the truth comes to you, but in fact, in art, this theory was developed also, and I guess in art it's maybe even a better place to comprehend what is a truth and what is a decision. And so, also for music it would be. For Heidegger, more important poets, for example, but in general, I guess that the idea of artworks is the place in which Heidegger developed his theory, and it was a bit the move of Badiou to take that theory out of this concept of artworks and take it to set theory. And this is like the bold move of Heidegger, and which is, in my opinion, absolutely impressive and interesting. But there you can have this ideas of decisions. And the other thing is, I still recommend to read Heidegger, because I think that Heidegger is nonetheless a very, very important thinker, even if you don't agree. And I guess you can understand a lot of the problem of a modern existence out of Heidegger. And I also think that it is necessary to take him very serious. And this is a thing that Badiou does, and for example Adorno doesn't. Yeah? There are a lot of thinkers who just escape from Heidegger and don't try to confront him. But Badiou is trying to do that. You have a question?
Yes, but I think there's also one thing in Adorno that's also, he has there's a lot of, one of the main tenets of Adorno's thought is also critique of positivism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you talk about more or less science, and I think it's way too simple also idea of science, right? Where's the idea of the thinking of science that also is able to critically go against science? The idea of science being a unified whole, and you have more or less of, even of it just being one thing that is good or that is bad, it seems to me to be really simplistic in a sense. And today, of course, even to put yourself on the positions of science, you could say, of course, that can be part of a climatical avant-garde movement, and then we can do a more radical, violent politics because we are on the side of science or of the truth. But it's also a really to speak within the system in a sense also, right? Because what is this but not a scientific civilization that we're already living in? So I think there's also a way of throwing out the whole critique of positivism a bit, and then I don't understand this really willingness to reinstitute the idea of truth. And I think that is exactly where also Adorno has another idea of what the possible is. And here's this idea of calling it that there's also, you talk about the Meta and andere Sein des Verschiedens. I think it's something like that, where there's it's like the being together of things that are different, right? And when you're talking about the meta-principle of maximalism, you could talk about this as a meta-principle of Adorno, but I think it's also something that Lyotard tried to think about when he talks about the regulative idea in a Kantian sense. And he's talking about this in terms of language games, where he says that the idea in a sense is to have the most possible language games and not have one that can colonize all the others or kill them off. But this is another idea of thinking a plurality and exactly the multiverse in a sense without the recurse to one, but with the principle of a togetherness of multiples or the maximal number of difference. But I think this is without going back to the critique of positivism conception of science, which I think is not at all tenable today. I think it's not neither politically nor philosophically. It makes any sense to try to revert back to an idea of a one true theory. And I think if there is anything that is totalitarian, it's not the multiverse. I think it's way more than the idea of taking one perspective and then trying to raise this to be the one that can speak the truth from a scientific position.
Absolutely, you can defend this position. What I'm trying is to go in another direction here. This is clear. I'm trying to rebuild that, which could be called a positivist idea of science, but nonetheless, what is also clear, you cannot just say that this is like the world we are seeing, because we know already that it is built up upon decisions, so it cannot completely get back to a positivist or objectivist idea of science. This is clear. It is impossible to get back to that. But it is an attempt to rebuild science in the sense of one science. And coming back to this idea of the critique of the one, which is very important in Badiou, I guess to some degree that the immanence of truth, the last book of Badiou, has a strong tendency to rebuild a bit this idea. And this is of one science to some degree, yeah, with these meta principles. And in that sense, I think it is also a book that is like a big turning point of Badiou himself to some degree, yeah, because you have in being in the event 1 and also on the second being in the event, you have a very Heideggerian idea, like everything is built up upon decisions and so on. And in the last book, he's trying to search for meta principles for that in ontological maximalism and the others. But of course, there's one point that has to be said here.
But even then, isn't that more the one of the subject and not the one of the science?
In what?
If you can speak about a positive one in the thought of Badiou, which is also, but then it seems to me that this one will always fall on the side of the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth, but not in a system of thinking of scientific production of knowledge, right? And it's not at the level of knowledge; it's the level of truth, which is the level of the subject also. It seems that you're trying to use Badiou to create exactly what he seems to go away from actually.
In the first books, he's trying to get away from that, yeah, absolutely. But in the last book, he is finding principles to get back to a more classical thinking of science. And it is also like, we talked a bit about this distinction between the generic orientation and the transcendent orientation. And in fact, what he is doing in the last book is the transcendent orientation. So you get back to a more strict, or even you could say absolutist idea of science in the last book, and I'm using somehow this position. But it's important to say in the book on the transitory ontology, there already Badiou states the principle of maximality. So it's already there, and I guess he wrote the book just shortly after being in event 1. He is finding or discussing at least a meta principle which could guide us to get out of the pluralism of mathematics. So it's an older idea of Badiou to find a principle of evaluation.
Et c'est quoi classical science? Il revient à la classical science.
Classical science in the sense.
Dans l'immanence de déité, il revient à la classical science.
Je pense que c'est voilà, là, c'est ce qu'il suppose. Il dit que c'est retour à... Je vous tiens quand même, il faut, je crois qu'on interrompt ça, oui. Et on peut continuer en déjeunant, etc. Bon, bah, écoute, merci.
Merci à vous, c'était magnifique.